Chapter 387. Walking out of Changle Palace. Li Mu had to admit that he had been careless this time. He had been forced by the Empress to swear an oath to the heavens that he would only leave her after helping her destroy the demon sect, subdue the ghost realm, and pacify the Yao kingdom. Fortunately, Li Mu was quick-witted and changed a phrase when he swore. He said that he would not leave her until he finished these things, and not Shendu or Great Zhou. If he could abduct the Empress, then it would not be considered leaving her. Whether or not the Great Zhou could destroy the demon sect, subdue the ghost realm, and pacify the Yao kingdom was a matter for the Great Zhou court. In any case, Li Mu had fulfilled his oath to the Empress. Didn't she like to plant flowers? When the time came, he would open a garden for her next door to where he, Lu Hanyan, and Li Qing lived in seclusion. As long as she did not feel bored, she could plant flowers for the rest of her life. Li Mu looked back and twitched the corner of his mouth. If she wanted to trick him, she would have to cultivate for a few more years. After swearing the oath, he once again brought up the matter of purging the office of consecration. What made Li Mu feel helpless was that, at some point in time, the Empress had handed over all the things that should have been done by her to him. She did not even hand it over to Li Mu. Instead, it was Li Mu who raised the problem and solved it himself. Now, she wanted Li Mu to be her slave for the rest of his life. If she had not given him so much and treated him so well, Li Mu might have gone back to inherit the Fulu school long ago. What really made Li Mu feel that he owed her was that the Empress had always stood by his side when facing the Zhou family and himself. She had also given him the greatest trust and the greatest freedom to reverse the verdict and take revenge for Li Qing's father. If he ran away like this, it would be too heartless for a woman to treat him like this. Even if Li Mu could not repay her with his body, he could not be so heartless. Consecrated office. Lord May of the Inner Guards had just arrived. He left behind an imperial edict and then floated away. The contents of the imperial edict made countless consecrators angry and dissatisfied. From today onwards, the consecration department would be under the management of the Bamboo Guards. Although they did not need to be merged into the Bamboo Guards, the Bamboo Guards Vice Commander Li Mu would be in charge of the consecration department. The Department of Offerings had always been a special existence in the Imperial Court. They were not from the Academy, nor were they officials of the Imperial Court. Their relationship with the Great Zhou Court was more like cooperation than subordination. The Imperial Court provided the consecrators with cultivation resources, while the consecrators worked for the Imperial Court. Both sides took what they needed. The Department of Consecration had always been an independent department, never under the jurisdiction of an official of the court. Even the Ministry of Official Personnel Affairs could only request for a consecrator and not order them to do so. This imperial edict shook the position of the consecrated division. For cultivators, a country was already a vague concept to them. What cultivators pursued their entire lives was supreme strength and the ethereal heavenly path. Most cultivators despise becoming a lackey of the imperial court, or rather, a lackey. However, the path of cultivation was not something that could be achieved by one person alone. Cultivation required resources, and cultivation resources were not easy to obtain for most cultivators without any background. In order to obtain cultivation resources like spiritual jades more easily, some cultivators with some strength would put down their pride and choose to become a consecrator of the imperial court. But this did not mean that they were willing to be under the jurisdiction of the imperial court. After becoming a consecrator, these people were still more unruly than the officials of the imperial court. They would submit to the strong, but would not submit to official rank. What is the Empress thinking? She actually let a brat control us? Although his talent is not bad, his cultivation has only just reached the 5th realm. What right does he have to command us? He killed more than 20 people from the old faction and forced Li Mu to ask for exile. Has Li Mu's hand finally reached the Department of Offerings? I don't know if you can tolerate it, but I can't. We must express our stance and protest. Everyone, don't come to the Department of Offerings tomorrow. Doesn't he want to be the master of the Department of Offerings? Just let him be the master of the Department of Offerings. Most of the consecrators in the Department of Offerings were opposed to this matter. If the Empress let a sixth realm cultivator take charge of the Department of Offerings, it would be fine. But Li Mu was only at the fifth realm, and had just reached the fifth realm. Any random consecrator here was stronger than him. To make them listen to the orders of a weakling was something that was very difficult to accept. Of course, among them, there was also a large portion who had long been bribed by the benefits of the old faction and harbored enmity towards Li Mu. Under this enmity, there were very quickly people who began to incite the other consecrators to take Li Mu down a notch. A group of people noisily left the Department of Offerings. Two elders with similar appearances stood in the courtyard with their hands behind their backs. The elder on the left said, "What do you think?" The elder on the right thought for a moment and said, "Killing him a little is good for his spirit. We have to let him know that the Department of Offerings is not a place where he can behave atrociously." The Empress temporarily placed the Department of Offerings under the Bamboo Guards. As the deputy commander of the Bamboo Guards, Li Mu naturally became the direct superior of the Department of Offerings. A few days ago, he had done a detailed search for information on the Department of Offerings. Currently, there were two sixth realm cultivators in the Department of Offerings. Both of them had just reached the sixth realm several years ago, and they were a pair of twin brothers. For the Imperial Court, fifth realm consecrators were easy to recruit, but sixth realm high consecrators were very difficult to recruit. When one's cultivation reached this level, they could already be considered one of the few powerful cultivators in the world. Whether it was out of dignity or the pursuit of a higher realm, they would not be willing to be the Imperial Court's lackeys. This also led to the Imperial Court having to pay a huge price every time they recruited a sixth realm cultivator. Not only did the Imperial Court have to provide them with large amounts of spiritual jades every year, but they also had to satisfy their various requests. After Li Mu saw the benefits of the two high consecrators, even he wanted to become a high consecrator himself. Li Mu could do what they could do, and Li Mu could do what they could not. He could guarantee that it would be worth more than the cost. If the Imperial Court gave him the resources given to these two people, Li Mu could guarantee that he would be able to create even greater value for the Imperial Court than them. Most importantly, these two people did not make much of a contribution every year. Li Mu even killed several dozen elders of the demon sect. The contributions of these two high consecrators to the Imperial Court were greater than the contributions of the entire Department of Offerings. However, other than the Empress's love, he did not receive anything else. This made Li Mu feel very unbalanced. He walked into the Department of Offerings and found it abnormally quiet. There were about 100 or so consecrators in the Imperial Court. Not everyone was at the Department of Offerings every day, but no matter the time, there should be at least 10 people on duty here. However, Li Mu went through all the duty rooms and did not see a single person. He found an old man cleaning in the backyard. After asking, he found out that there were usually at least 20 consecrators in the Department of Offerings, but today there was not a single one. It was obvious that they were targeting him. The entire Department of Offerings was more united than Li Mu had imagined. There was no one in the Department of Offerings, so there was no point for Li Mu to stay here. He said to the old man cleaning, "Tell them that in 3 days, all the consecrators in the divine capital must report to the Department of Offerings. Those who do not make it in 3 days will be expelled from the Department of Offerings." Before leaving the Department of Offerings, Li Mu took a list of consecrators with him. On the list, it was clearly written which consecrators were out on missions and which ones did not have missions to stay in the divine capital. It was also very simple to inform them. The consecrators were treated very well. There was an entire square in the divine capital dedicated to consecrators. Among them, only Realm 4 consecrators could be allocated a courtyard with 2 entrances. Realm 5 consecrators lived in residences with at least 3 entrances and 3 entrances. The 2 great consecrators' residences both had 5 entrances and were fully staffed with servant girls and servants. When he learned of this news, Li Mu even cried out on behalf of old Zhang for a while. In truth, when he had first arrived in the divine capital, he would not have had to work so hard if he wanted to live in a larger residence. He only needed to resign his official position and join the Department of Offerings, and he would immediately be given a courtyard with 2 entrances or even 3 entrances. The imperial court treated these outsiders much better than the officials. Li Mu's request that all the consecrators in the Department of Offerings must report to the Department of Offerings within 3 days was quickly made known to all the consecrators. What does this mean? If we're expelled from the Department of Offerings within 3 days, can he expel everyone if none of us go? I'd like to see what he'll do when he's the only one left in the Department of Offerings. That's not good. Li Mu is not to be trifled with. Look at all the things he's done in the past. Which one of them wasn't serious? What if he really expels all of us? Haha. Would a Department of Offerings, with only him, still be called a Department of Offerings? When the time comes, the one to be expelled will only be Li Mu. He'll have to invite us back in the same way he expelled us. Since that's the case, let's not go. After leaving the Yamen, Li Mu passed by the Department of Offerings on his way home and swept his gaze over it. Tomorrow was the 3-day deadline. He wasn't sure what the outcome would be tomorrow, but he was clear that a new official would make 3 sweeping fires. The first fire had to burn brighter. If he couldn't establish his authority, he wouldn't be able to mingle in the Department of Offerings in the future. The current problem was that the Department of Offerings had as many experts as there were clouds. That place was not the imperial court, and the offerings were not officials of either party. Any sort of open or secret schemes were useless. In that place, absolute strength was the only thing that mattered. Unfortunately, Li Mu's own strength was not great, and he was also a commander without any reliable helpers. Just by himself, how could he contend against a group of experts of the same level? Fortune-telling, 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 treating infertility, guaranteeing the birth of a fat child. As he walked down the street, a familiar voice once more sounded by his ear. Li Mu looked in a certain direction and suddenly thought of a plan. At the corner of the street, the slovenly Taoist priest was currently soliciting customers. In front of his divination stall, a shadow suddenly appeared. He raised his head and glanced at Li Mu, then waved his hand as if he was swatting away a fly. Quickly leave, quickly leave. This old man doesn't want to see you. This time, Li Mu did not leave. Looking at the Taoist priest, he said, Senior's cultivation is so high. To be a fortune teller is a waste of talent. I don't know if Senior wants to become offerings in the imperial court. Offerings? The Taoist priest jumped up from the ground, glaring angrily at Li Mu. Gritting his teeth, he said, What kind of person is this old man? This old man doesn't even care about the 6 great sects. What is the Great Zhou Court? You actually want this old man to be a dog of the imperial court. If this wasn't the divine capital, this old man would definitely turn you into a dog first. Li Mu continued. With Senior's cultivation, if you join the Department of Offerings, you could become a great offering and live in a 5-section residence. The imperial court will also provide you with maids and servants. The Taoist priest looked at Li Mu and said, Before this old man changes his mind, you'd best leave quickly. Li Mu shook his head, saying, Senior probably doesn't want the heavenly fortune talisman either. Just as he turned around, someone grabbed his wrist. The Taoist priest grabbed Li Mu's hand and said seriously, Whether it's the heavenly fortune talisman or not isn't important. The main thing is that this old man wants that big residence. You're still young, so you don't understand. After drifting for a lifetime, when you get older, what you seek is a stable place, a place that can shelter you from the wind and rain. All right, you mentioned the heavenly fortune talisman just now. What? Is it a heavenly fortune talisman if you join the Department of Offerings? P.S. Recommending the Book of the Old Days by the Beowulf Dog. The world is about to be in chaos. Demons are emerging in an endless stream. Chu Qiguang is guarding his territory. Looking at the demons working peacefully and the old employees who had just turned into zombies, he shouted, How dare you call the sun and moon to change the sky? Chapter 388. From the sloppy Taoist priest's reaction, Li Mu knew that he had made the right bet. All 6th-level cultivators would eventually face a problem, their lifespan. Without reaching the upper 3 realms, their lifespan would not be able to break through the limits of mortals. 260 years, or 120 years, was their life and death moment. If they were mortals, then it would be fine. Although 260 years was a long enough lifespan, mortals could not escape from old age, sickness, and death. Most people could not even live past 160 years, so naturally they would not encounter a situation where their lifespan ran out. But cultivators were different. As long as a 6th-level cultivator did not seek death like the Thousand Illusions' Venerable Master or the Nether Saint, they would not die so easily. The only thing that could kill them was time. A heavenly secret talisman could buy them 10 years of lifespan. In these 10 years, as long as they broke through to the 7th level, they would immediately gain another 60 years of lifespan. Thus, there was no need to be envious of these 6th-level cultivators, especially those at the peak of the 6th level. Although they were incomparably prominent in front of others, they might not have many years left in their lifespan. Although their cultivation was not as high as theirs from now on, they could live longer than them. Limu looked at the sloppy Taoist priest and said, "The imperial court has always been generous to the offerings. As long as Senior joins the offerings department, I guarantee that you will receive a heavenly secret talisman within a year." Although the materials for the heavenly secret talisman were precious, if the imperial court wanted to gather them, they could also gather a few sets. After the excitement just now, the old man had already calmed down. He glanced at Limu and said, "Kid, don't try to trick me. The heavenly secret talisman is a saint-level Fulu. Even those old fellows in the Fulu school could not draw it. Who in the great Zhou court can draw a saint-level talisman?" Seeing was believing. Limu stretched out his hand and swiped at the air in front of him. An illusory image of a Fulu covered in mysterious runes appeared before the Taoist priest's eyes. He could easily reproduce the Fulu that he had once drawn. Taoist priest looked at Fulu on the screen, and his eyes lit up. "Saint level, it's really a saint level." Then his face was filled with smiles again as he said, "To be honest, although this old man has spent most of his life traveling outside, this old man was born in the Great Zhou dynasty and could be considered a citizen of the Great Zhou dynasty. It is only right for me to do something for the Great Zhou dynasty. This old man will enter the department of consecration." Limu cupped his hands and said, "Senior is truly righteous. Tomorrow morning, you can directly report to the veneration department." After bidding farewell to the Taoist priest, Limu finally felt at ease. In the end, the consecrated office was a place where strength spoke. Without a super powerhouse holding down the fort, Limu did not have the confidence to speak. Speaking of which, exchanging a divine secret talisman for a powerhouse at the peak of the 6th realm was a very good deal. Unfortunately, the materials needed for the saint-level Fulu were very precious, and this talisman could not be mass-produced. Otherwise, as long as the Empress announced to the world that she would give a divine secret talisman to any 6th realm powerhouse who joined the consecrated office, the Department of Consecrated Office of the Great Zhou would be the most powerful force in the 10 continents and 3 islands. What 6 schools and 4 sects? Even the demonic path would not be able to compete with them. The divine secret talisman was not only useful for 6th realm powerhouses, but also for 7th realm powerhouses. Although the divine secret talisman did not increase the lifespan of powerhouses above the transcendent realm by that much, every year of lifespan increased the chances of advancing. Every time one advanced a level in the upper 3 realms, their lifespan would increase by 60 years. If they made the right bet, their lifespan would be extended by 60 years. Who would not be tempted? As long as there were enough materials, he could let the Empress visit him every few days. With the help of her talisman, Limu was confident that he could turn the consecrated office into a retirement home for the super powerhouses of the continent. Of course, even the cleverest housewife could not cook without rice. This plan, at present, could only be imagined by Limu. Early the next morning, Limu arrived at the consecrated office a quarter of an hour later than the usual time. Inside the consecrated office, it was quiet. Apart from the old man sweeping the floor, there was no one else in the entire consecrated office. Limu moved a chair and sat in the courtyard of the consecrated office. The old man, sweeping the floor, obeyed Limu's instructions. He took an incense burner, inserted an incense stick, lit it, and placed it in the courtyard of the consecrated office. Li Mu looked at the incense stick and said, "Tell them, before this incense stick burns out, if they do not report to the consecrated office, they will be expelled from the consecrated office, and all the rewards bestowed by the imperial court will be withdrawn. From now on, they will no longer enjoy the treatment of a consecrated." The old man walked out of the consecrated office and walked briskly towards a nearby market. Dun Square. There were hundreds of markets in the Immortal's capital, each with its own function. Dun Square was a residential market, located in the core area of the Immortal's capital. Although it was a residential market, the people who lived in the market were not commoners, officials, or nobles. They were consecrated members recruited by the imperial court. The consecrated members were the same as the officials of the imperial court. They ate the salary of the imperial court, and their treatment was even better than the officials. Every person had a house bestowed by the imperial court, and all the maids and servants in the house were available. In a certain house in Dun Square, 10 or so consecrated members were gathered together. Expelling them from the consecrated office in less than the time of an incense stick. Who is he trying to scare? Expelling everyone from the consecrated office. How will he explain this to the imperial court? This morning, not a single person went. I want to see how he will deal with this. After discussing for a while, they decided to continue staying here. In some other houses in the square, there was also hesitation in the eyes of some people. Should we go or not? Li Mu is not someone to be trifled with. The Empress also favors him so much. How many people have fallen into his hands? If he really expels us, where will our future cultivation resources come from? Why don't we just forget about it? The Xiao family has not given us any benefits. We have no need to oppose Li Mu. Li Mu sat in the consecrated office. Ever since the incense stick had burned halfway, consecrated members had begun to walk in from outside. After clasping their hands to Li Mu, they returned to their respective duty rooms. There was also a portion of people who stood outside the consecrated office, chatting and laughing with the people beside them. They were all consecrated members of the consecrated office, but they did not walk in. Their gazes would occasionally glance at the incense stick as if they were waiting for something. Only when the last stick of incense had burned out did they walk into the consecrated office. If they were frightened by Li Mu on his first day at the consecrated office and obediently returned to the consecrated office in less than the time of an incense stick, then they could forget about having a good life in the future. The reason they had waited until the incense stick had burned out before walking into the consecrated office was to give Li Mu a show of strength. They had to let Li Mu know that the consecrated office was not the same as the imperial court. However, when the incense stick had burned out and the first person outside the door wanted to walk into the consecrated office, a figure blocked their way. That fifth realm consecrated looked at Li Mu, raised his eyebrows, and asked, "Lordly, what are you doing?" Li Mu said indifferently, "This is the consecrated office." That consecrated said, "Could it be that we consecrated members cannot enter the consecrated office?" Li Mu said, "In the past, yes, but not now." Before the incense stick has burned out, everyone who did not report to the consecrated office has already been expelled from the consecrated office. I will give you all 1 day to move out of Dun Square, and henceforth do not act in the name of consecrated members of the Great Zhou. That consecrated did not expect that Li Mu would actually dare to do this. His face darkened as he said, "Lordly, this is your first day at the consecrated office. Are you going to be so ruthless?" As he spoke, a fierce aura emanated from his body. The consecrated behind him also had an invisible aura rising from his body. Under the pressure of this aura, a few strands of hair by Li Mu's ears were blown up, and his clothes also fluttered loudly. A piece of the green brick under his feet was crushed by his foot. The next moment, Li Mu took a step forward. Boom! An even more powerful aura erupted from his body. The dozen or so consecrated at the entrance of the consecrated office retreated several steps under this aura. The fifth realm consecrated could still barely hold on, but several fourth realm cultivators directly fainted under the impact of that aura. Li Mu looked at them and said indifferently, "From now on, you are no longer consecrated members of the imperial court. The consecrated office is an important place of the imperial court. Those who trespass into the consecrated office without permission will be expelled, and those who trespass repeatedly will be killed without mercy. Several Fifth Realm consecrated members struggled to resist Li Mu's aura pressure, their hearts extremely shocked. They did not expect Li Mu to be able to release such an aura when he had just advanced. In that instant, they even felt as if they were facing a Sixth Realm cultivator. Li Mu's strength was far stronger than they had imagined. They originally wanted to show him their strength, but now they were the ones who could not step down. Just as these people did not know how to deal with it, a gentle force swept over them. The aura emanating from Li Mu collided with this gentle force and canceled each other out. Two elders with similar appearances slowly walked to the entrance of the consecrated office. The head consecrated is here. Greetings, head consecrated. Seeing the two old men, the crowd seemed to have found their backbone and bowed to greet them. The elder on the left glanced at them and said, "What are you all standing here for? Hurry up and go in." The head consecrated spoke, and these people heaved a sigh of relief. The leader was about to enter, but just as he took a step into the consecrated office, he was suddenly hit in the chest by a golden light, and his entire body was sent flying. After sending one person flying, the Dao bell shrunk to the size of a palm and floated on Li Mu's shoulder. Seeing this, the few consecrated who were about to enter immediately stopped in their tracks. They never would have thought that Li Mu would not even give face to the head consecrated. The elder who had spoken just now had a dark expression and asked, "Lord Li, what is the meaning of this?" "Nothing." Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "I've said before that those who do not last 5 minutes will be expelled from the consecrated office. These people are standing outside the consecrated office and dragging their feet until the incense burns out. Clearly, they do not want to be consecrated anymore. The consecrated office is an important place of the imperial court. Not just any random person can casually enter." The elder looked at him and asked slowly, "The two of us are also late. Does Lord Li want to expel the two of us from the consecrated office as well?" Sixth Realm cultivators were not easy to recruit. Li Mu did not have this authority. Although Li Mu really wanted to expel them to save resources for the imperial court, if he really did expel them, the imperial court would probably also put pressure on the empress. Li Mu looked at him and said, "Seeing that you are the head consecrated, I can make an exception this time. There will not be a next time. There is no need to wait for a next time." The elder who had not spoken all this time snorted and said coldly, "If you want to expel them today, then the two of us will voluntarily resign. You can expel us as well while you are at it." Li Mu looked at this elder in shock. There was actually such a good thing? He was just worrying about how to expel them. With the sloppy Taoist priest, who was at the peak of the Sixth Realm, there was no need for the two of them. Wasn't this just a waste of the imperial court's resources? Li Mu looked at the two of them in surprise and said, "Words are no guarantee. Why don't the two of you make an oath to the heavenly Tao?" Chapter 389. Li Mu wanted nothing more than for these two old fellows to leave the Department of Offerings. They lived in large mansions and were served by more than a dozen maids and servants. Every year, the imperial court would provide them with large amounts of spiritual jades, spiritual herbs, and other cultivation resources. Despite such good treatment, they couldn't even go to work on time. The results they could produce every year were even less. Thinking about Li Mu himself, with a meager salary, worried about the emperor's heart, purged the rebels, killed the demon path, and built the link between the imperial court and the Fulu school. Besides his own official duties, he also had to approve memorials for the empress and give her special treatment. Thinking of his own efforts, the head offerings efforts, the treatment of the head offerings, and his own treatment, Li Mu felt even more unbalanced. The two head offerings had not expected that Li Mu would be so unyielding. After expelling the two head offerings and dozens of other offerings, what was left of the Department of Offerings? Did he not think that if he really did this, how would he explain it to the imperial court? As for making them swear an oath to the heavenly Tao, this was naturally impossible. Any cultivator with a normal mind would not joke about the heavenly Tao. The two coldly snorted at the same time, clasped their hands behind their backs, and left. Li Mu was, after all, acting on the Empress's orders. With their status, there was no need to say too much to Li Mu. When the Department of Offerings fell into chaos because of him, he would not be able to explain himself to the imperial court and would naturally leave with his tail between his legs. Seeing that the two head reverends had left, those reverends who didn't report to the Reverend Department within the time set by Li Mu also didn't dare to step into the Reverend's Department. They all left with gloomy faces. This was only a temporary departure. According to Li Mu's own rules, this time, more than half of the combat strength of the Department of Offerings would be expelled from the Department of Offerings. The Department of Offerings of the Great Zhou existed in name only. Once the imperial court investigated, he would not be able to bear the responsibility and would still have to invite them back. And the offerings of the Department of Offerings were secretly rejoicing that they had changed their minds at the last moment. Li Mu didn't even give face to the great consecrator, much less them. Once they lost their status as consecrators, where would they find cultivation resources? Without a sect or family. Leaving the consecrator department was the same as cutting off their cultivation path. After sending those people away, Li Mu sat back down on the chair in the courtyard of the Office of Offerings. The original intention of the consecration department was to recruit strong cultivators to serve the country. They did not want them to participate in the politics of the court. However, the consecrators were in the divine capital. These matters could not be avoided easily. The current consecrated office had already deviated from its original intentions and needed a complete change. Of course, the price of change was also huge. This time, Li Mu had expelled more than half of the consecrators of the consecration department. Although this was more beneficial for future management, the drawbacks were also obvious. The overall strength of the consecration department had severely shrunk. Although they had the unkempt Taoist priest, no matter how powerful he was only one person. He could not solve the problem of the 36 counties of Great Zhou. Right now, the Foreign Service Division urgently needed fresh blood. However, they could not expand their recruitment at will. Otherwise, the previous internal guard was a lesson to be learned. If someone with bad intentions sneaked in and gave them a fatal blow at the critical moment, all their previous efforts would be in vain. Li Mu thought for a while and stretched out his hand. A white light flashed and a black, palm-sized wooden block appeared in his hand. The four sides of the wooden block were engraved with mysterious runes. After Li Mu injected his spiritual power, these runes began to flicker and emit a faint light. After the light on the wooden block stabilized, Li Mu put the wooden block to his ear and said, "Hey, is this Senior Brother Sect Master? I'm Li Mu. Last time, we talked about the cooperation between the Ancestral Court and the Imperial Court. You promised to send some elders over. What? 10? 10 is too little, at least 30. 30 isn't much at all. What's the point of them staying in the mountains? Why don't we pull them out to temper their minds? It's good for their future cultivation." Li Mu put down the wooden box and saw the unkempt Taoist priest standing in the courtyard of the consecration department. He looked at Li Mu with a puzzled gaze and asked, "Xian Jizi is your senior brother?" Li Mu nodded. The Taoist priest thought for a while and asked again, "Then who is your master?" Li Mu said, "My master is Talisman Daozi." The Taoist priest revealed a look of understanding and said, "So it's him?" Li Mu asked, "Senior, do you know my master?" The Taoist priest shook his head and said, "I'm not familiar with him. Talisman Daozi has some talent in the Fulu, but his cultivation talent is not high. His lifespan should be in these 2 years." "Your master," Li Mu said, "with the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets, it should be able to buy master 10 more years." The Taoist priest was stunned and then said, "So the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets was given to Talisman Daozi, who drew the Fulu. As far as I know, no one in the Fulu school has this ability." Li Mu smiled and said, "Senior, you don't have to worry about this. After a year, Senior's Talisman of Heavenly Secrets will be handed over." The unkempt Taoist priest didn't ask any more questions and said, "What do you need me to do?" Li Mu said, "Senior, you only need to preside over the offerings department. The other matters will be taken care of by the offerings department below." The head reverend's greatest use in the reverend department was to intimidate others. If there weren't any Sixth Realm cultivators holding down the fort, the words Reverend Department would inevitably lose some of its grandeur. When the head offerings were truly needed, it would be when an earth-shattering event happened in a certain county. On the first day, Li Mu took charge of the offerings department. He drove away more than half of the offerings and angered 2 head offerings. Soon, the news spread throughout the divine capital and caused a heated discussion among the officials. This is too ridiculous. In less than an incense stick's time, he will be expelled from the offerings department. He wants to turn the offerings department into his own. Even the 2 head offerings were angered away. Without the head offerings, the offerings department is nothing but an empty name. Let's see how Li Mu will deal with this. He will destroy the offerings department. Many officials in the court thought that Li Mu's actions were a bit excessive. In the Ministry of War, several officials discussed this matter and had different opinions. Strict adherence to orders and prohibitions. Compared to the court, he is more suited to be in the military. If he doesn't use this method, it will be difficult to get rid of the offerings department. He doesn't have to be so harsh on the 2 head offerings. After all, the offerings department still depends on them. Don Square. The offerings that Li Mu drove out of the offerings department were all waiting at home. The offerings department was already understaffed. Without more than half of the offerings department was simply unable to deal with the emergencies that occurred in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou. Although there were many officials in the court with decent cultivation, they each had their own duties and official duties. It was impossible for them to leave their posts to deal with these matters. When the time came, it would be Li Mu begging them to return. A day later, someone knocked on the doors of these offerings. It wasn't Li Mu who knocked, but an official from the Ministry of Works. The offerings' benefits were very good. Apart from receiving a generous monthly salary, they could also live in large mansions arranged by the court and have maids and servants to serve them. Of course, the premise of all this was that they were still offerings of the court. When they were no longer offerings, all their benefits would be taken away. Is that Li Mu serious? What do we do now? Is there no one in such a large court who can control him? Why isn't the head offering saying anything? The orders of the Ministry of Works could not be disobeyed. No matter how unwilling these people were, they could only move out of their mansions. Yesterday, they were still noble offerings of the Great Zhou. They lived in mansions bestowed by the court and had maids and servants to serve them. Overnight, they were driven out of their homes and became homeless wanderers. But they did not leave the divine capital. Everyone firmly believed that there would be a time for them to return. This confidence was shattered when they saw the 30 manifestation realm experts enter the offerings department. Countless former offerings stared at the doors of the offerings department in shock. Where did he find so many experts in such a short time? Is this his new consecrator? So he planned all of this. When they saw these experts, their hearts were filled with regret. They had been so fearless because without them, the offerings department would not be able to function in a short time. Who would have thought that Li Mu would only use 3 days to find people to replace them? They had only wanted to give Li Mu a show of strength, but not only had they failed to scare Li Mu, they had also lost their status as offerings. They had chosen to join the offerings department because there were no sects or clans to provide them with cultivation resources. Once they left the court, their path of cultivation would become abnormally difficult. While these former consecrated elders were feeling regretful, Li Mu, who was in the consecrated office, had a satisfied expression on his face. Xianjizi had taken his words seriously. In just 3 days, the 30 elders of the Fulu school arrived at the divine capital from Mount Baiyun. Greetings, martial uncle. The 30 people stood in 3 neat rows and bowed to Li Mu. Li Mu reached out and gestured. We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. The old man in the lead walked over to Li Mu and cupped his fists. Before we left, the sect master instructed us to listen to Martial Uncle Ling Jizi's orders when we arrive at the divine capital. Please instruct us, Martial Uncle. Li Mu felt gratified when he saw the obedient faces of these people. His own disciples were still the most obedient and sensible. What were those offerings who had looked up at the sky when they spoke? He waved his hand and told everyone, "There's no hurry. Let me arrange your accommodations first." Soon, Limu led everyone to the duh and square. After he left, the doors of the offerings department closed. A few former offerings who had been pacing back and forth at the doors shook their heads in disappointment. They could only turn around and leave. After these powerhouses arrived, the doors of the offerings department were completely shut. Before long, two old men walked over to the doors of the offerings department. They were the two high offerings. They glanced at the tightly shut doors of the offerings department and slowly floated up. A moment later, the two of them landed heavily on the ground. The slovenly Taoist priest placed his hands on their shoulders and said indifferently, "Behave yourselves. This is not a place for you to wander around as you please." Chapter 390. After being forced down from the sky, the two great reverends did not turn their heads, nor did they dare to turn their heads. Although the person behind them only revealed a little bit of his aura, just this little bit of aura was enough to make them feel fearful. This was definitely a 6th realm cultivator, and a peak 6th realm cultivator at that. He was different from people like them who had just entered the 6th realm a few years ago. This kind of person already had one foot in the 7th realm. Although the other foot might never be able to cross over, it was still not someone the two of them could contend against. A peak 6th realm cultivator had the ability to kill a normal 6th realm cultivator. One of the old men said with a slightly pale face, "Senior, the two of us are reverends of the Great Zhou. This is the Department of Reverence." The sloppy Taoist priest patted their shoulders and said, "You two are reverends of the Great Zhou." "Who isn't? Don't use the imperial court to pressure me. That brat said we can't enter, so we can't enter. Don't cause trouble here. If something goes wrong with this old man's Tianji talisman and my lifespan ends, I'll drag you two down with me." With that, his body floated up and flew back into the Department of Reverence. The twin old men looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The old man on the right muttered, "He really is a peak cultivator whose lifespan is about to end. It's best not to provoke him. How did that Limu recruit such a powerful cultivator?" The old man on the left knocked his head and said angrily, "Is that the point?" "The point is the Tianji talisman. The Tianji talisman is a Tianji talisman that can increase one's lifespan by 10 years. Although the two brothers still had 20 years of lifespan, 20 years was not enough for them to break through to the 7th realm. There was an insurmountable gap between the middle realm and the upper realm. Not to mention 20 years. Even if they were given another 40 years, they might not have a chance. But even if they couldn't break through, who wouldn't want to live for 10 more years? In these 10 years, if they encountered a great opportunity and were lucky enough to break through, their lifespan would increase by 60 years. Which cultivator could resist the temptation of 60 more years of lifespan? Unfortunately, the heavenly secret talisman was a saint-ranked Fulu. Up until now, no one had been able to draw it. The ancestral court of Fulu school. Perhaps there were still people who had the ability to draw a saint-level Fulu, but the materials used to draw a Fulu of this level were too precious, and the success rate was too low. Even a school as profound as Fulu school could not afford the risk of failure. Could it be that the price the imperial court paid for that Taoist priest to join the Department of Offerings was a heavenly secrets talisman? Although they had no use for it at the moment, they would need it sooner or later. If they could obtain one, they would be able to live for at least 10 more years. Even if they couldn't break through in the next 10 years, just being alive was already good enough. After Limu had settled down a group of senior apprentice nephews, when he returned to the Office of Offerings, he saw two high priests pacing back and forth outside the Office of Offerings. It seemed that although the slovenly Taoist priest was strange and always did things that did not suit his status, he still did his job diligently. Limu walked over, looked at the two, and said, "Didn't the two of you want to leave the Office of Offerings? Why are you still here? Is there something else you want to take?" The two awkwardly smiled. An old man said, "Lord Li is joking. The two of us eat the salary of the imperial court and share the burdens of the imperial court. How can we leave the Office of Offerings?" Limu said, "Those disobedient priests have already been expelled by me. I still remember the words the two of you said that day. The old man who had just spoken said, "Those people are the imperial court's priests, but did not listen to the imperial court's orders. They should have been expelled. Wardley has done the right thing." Li Mu asked, "So, the two of you have no objections to this official's actions?" The two nodded at the same time, saying no. Li Mu looked at the two, lightly sighed, and said, "In truth, the two of you have profound cultivation. This official also wants to keep the two of you, but the treasury has been tight in recent years. There are not many spiritual jades, spiritual medicines, spiritual treasures, and the like left. We really cannot afford to support the two of you," the old man said. "Lordly is joking. Hasn't the Office of Offerings recruited a new high priest? That senior salary must be even higher, right?" Li Mu shook his head, saying, "You have misunderstood. That senior will enter the Office of Offerings and does not need a salary." The old man was taken aback, then said, "But I heard that the Imperial Court will give him a heavenly secret talisman." Li Mu said, "He only wants a heavenly secret talisman, not spiritual jades or spiritual medicines. If the two of you also only want a heavenly secret talisman, you can also stay in the Office of Offerings. Otherwise, the two of you should find another place. I believe that with the two of your strength, no matter which sect you join, you'll be honored guests. The Office of Offerings is small and cannot afford to support two great deities. At the 6th level of cultivation, the effect of spiritual jades on cultivation was very small, unless they could absorb an entire spiritual jade mine. Compared to spiritual jades, the heavenly secret talisman was an item that could truly increase one's lifespan. Without this item, 20 years later would be the day of their death. No matter which sect they joined, they would not be able to obtain a heavenly secret talisman, and the cultivation resources they could obtain would not be much more than in the Office of Offerings. The two exchanged glances, their gazes meeting, and quickly came to a decision. The slightly thinner old man smiled and said, "Actually, spiritual jades, spiritual medicines, and a heavenly secret talisman are not important. What is important is that the two of us have been in the Office of Offerings for many years and have long developed feelings for each other. We are prepared to stay in the Office of Offerings until the day of our death." "That's right. When will that heavenly secret talisman be given out?" Li Mu said, 5 years later. The old man frowned and asked, "So long? That senior will also only receive it in 5 years?" Li Mu smiled and said, "That senior's cultivation has already reached the peak of the 6th level. He will receive the heavenly secret talisman in a year's time." The two of them knew that Li Mu had only said half of what he had said. Only a peak of the 6th level cultivation could receive the heavenly secret talisman in a year's time. Their cultivation was far inferior to his, and they would also need to work for the Imperial Court for a longer period of time. The thin old man thought for a while, then said, "Can we take a look at the heavenly secret talisman first?" Li Mu stretched out his hand and lightly swiped at the air, and the image of the heavenly secret talisman appeared in front of the two. Li Mu looked at them and said, "The Imperial Court does not have a finished product for this talisman. We will first need to gather the materials, and this will also take some time." The two old men fell into deep thought for a long time, and then the thin old man said, "Allow us to consider it." Li Mu nonchalantly said, "The two of you can do as you please." The two old men left the Office of Offerings and returned to their residences to continue their discussion. The success rate of a saint-level Fulu talisman is extremely low. One may be able to draw one, but not a second one. But that Taoist priest also doesn't seem like someone who's so easily fooled. He doesn't have much lifespan left, so we can only choose to believe him. We still have to wait and see. We can stay for a year. If that person really does obtain the heavenly secret talisman, it won't be too late to continue staying in the Office of Offerings. In the Imperial Palace, Li Mu had already walked to the entrance of Changle Palace. There was no need to doubt the strength of those two high reverends. Although they were not as strong as the slovenly Taoist priest, they were still solid 6th realm cultivators. In Mount Baiyun, they would also be peak leaders. If the Imperial Court spent a large amount of resources to raise such people as mascots, Li Mu naturally wouldn't agree to it. But if they could work for the imperial court for free, then the more the better. In the end, they were still two sixth realm cultivators. Li Mu did not intend to let them go so easily. But these old monsters who had lived for a century were not so easily fooled. If he did not show some true ability, he might not be able to intimidate them. Thus, he planned to draw a saint-level Fu Lu talisman right now. Before coming to the Imperial Palace, Li Mu specially made a trip home to tell Lu Hanyin and Li Qing that he might not return home for 3 or 4 days, and that they did not need to worry. Even for the current Li Mu, drawing a saint-level Fu Lu talisman was a very taxing task. Before officially drawing the talisman, he had to adjust himself to his best condition to ensure that the talisman could be successfully drawn on the first try. Just now, Li Mu used the spirit snail to inform the Empress. She agreed almost without thinking. Li Mu walked to Changle Palace and said, "In these 3 to 4 days, I may have to stay in the palace and adjust myself to my best condition." "Zhou," he said, "just stay in the back hall of Changle Palace. If you need anything, I will ask the apricot guards to prepare it." Li Mu said again, "My own magic power is not enough to draw a saint-level Fu Lu talisman. When the time comes, I will have to trouble your majesty." Zhou nodded and said, "I understand. When the time comes, I will help you." Perhaps because they had been together for a long time, Li Mu still had some distance between him and Xian Jizi. But with the Empress, there was none at all. With her by his side, Li Mu had no worries at all. Talisman drawing was a very ritualistic affair, even more so when it came to high-level Fu Lu talismans. When the first seats of Mount Baiyun were drawing the saint-level Fu Lu talisman, they would burn incense and bathe half a month in advance in order to ensure the success rate. Then, they would lock themselves in a quiet room and adjust their magic power and mind to their best condition before starting to draw the talisman. This was the Empress's bedroom. Burning incense and bathing were unnecessary. What Li Mu needed to do was to draw the Tianji talisman's runes over and over again until they formed muscle memory. This was the only way to ensure that he could fully control his magic power while drawing the talisman. The last time he drew the Tianji talisman was a few months ago. Now that he was going to do it again, everything had to be prepared again. In these 3 days, the only thing Li Mu had to do was practice. As for the materials used to draw the talisman, the Empress had already asked Mr. Mei to prepare them. Changle Palace, back hall. On the table, the materials used to draw the talisman were placed neatly. Li Mu stood behind the table, took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and said, "Your Majesty, I am ready." Zhou sat cross-legged on the bed. A white light shot out from her body and entered Li Mu's body. Li Mu opened his eyes again. His gaze was deep, as if it contained the sun, moon, and stars. He picked up the talisman brush, wrapped it in talisman liquid, and slowly put it down. Shendu. 3 days passed without any disturbances. A few days ago, Li Mu took charge of the Department of Worship and expelled more than half of the worship. It seemed that he had a bad relationship with the two great worship. Many people were waiting for his next move, but he disappeared without warning for 3 days. In these 3 days, he did not go to the Department of Ministers, nor did he go to the Department of Worship. Even the people of Shandu did not see him on the streets. Other than that, there was another strange thing. Yesterday's morning court session was stopped for no reason. Since the Empress stabilized her power, the morning court session was held every 3 days. It was very regular, and there were almost no exceptions. Occasionally, it was stopped for some big sacrificial ceremonies. It had to be said that the Empress was much more diligent than the previous emperor in the morning court session. Among all the previous emperors, perhaps only Emperor One, who held morning court every day, was more diligent than the Empress. The Empress and Li Mu disappeared at the same time, which made people's imagination run wild. Especially 3 days ago, someone saw Li Mu walk into Changle Palace with their own eyes. Changle Palace was the Empress's bedroom. She usually gathered the ministers in Shangyang Palace. Among the foreign ministers, only Li Mu could freely enter and leave her bedroom. Li Mu had not come out for 3 whole days after entering Changle Palace. Although the people did not dare to talk about it, they had thought a lot in their hearts. Some people even suspected that the Empress had no intention of passing the throne to the Shao clan or the Zhou clan, but wanted to have a son of her own. Li Mu looked like a favored minister, but he was actually a favored concubine, or the Empress had already chosen him as the Empress. As for Li Mu's wife, it was just a cover. Otherwise, how could they stay in Changle Palace for 3 days without coming out? And Li Mu's family did not have the slightest intention of looking for him. The Empress, who had always been diligent, had even stopped the morning court session for Li Mu. This was not a favored minister messing up the government, but a favored concubine messing up the government. Just as some of the officials were thinking this, they suddenly felt an inexplicable palpitation. Then, they realized that the sky had darkened without them noticing. An official was transcribing a dossier when the books on the table suddenly rustled in the wind. Just as he was about to close the window, he caught a glimpse of the sky outside the window. He could not help but stand up with a shocked expression and said in a panic, "What is this?" In the divine capital, all the officials in the palace walked out and looked at the sky. They saw that the originally cloudless sky was suddenly filled with dark clouds. The dark clouds covered the sky and covered the entire divine capital. It was as if the entire world had darkened. The dark clouds were extremely low. Everyone felt as if a huge rock was pressing on their chests, and they could not breathe at all. What's going on? Why is there suddenly such a phenomenon in the divine capital? I can't breathe. It's so uncomfortable. The citizens of the divine capital were also shocked by the sudden phenomenon. This doomsday-like scene made everyone uneasy. Dark clouds were still gathering in the sky. Soon, they were as thick as ink. Lightning snakes danced in the dark clouds from time to time, adding a bit of fear to the scene. In the divine capital, the 4 academies. 4 figures floated up at the same time. This is heavenly tribulation. Someone has ascended to the 7th realm? No, the heavenly tribulation of the 7th realm is stronger than this. In the White Deer Academy, a middle-aged man pinched his fingers and murmured, "It's either someone ascending to the 7th realm or a precious treasure has appeared. I wonder what it is that caused this phenomenon." In the consecration department, the sloppy Taoist priest was dozing off. His eyes suddenly opened, and he instantly appeared in the courtyard. He looked at the phenomenon in the sky and was stunned for a moment. Then, shock appeared on his face, and he blurted out, "Motherf asterisk Ker, heavenly tribulation." Someone drew a saint-level Motherf asterisk Ker. Oh my, there's really someone in the great Zhou court who can draw something like this. In the Dawn Square, the 2 high consecrators had long been alarmed by the phenomenon. They stood in the courtyard and looked up in shock. When the dark clouds gathered to a limit, they released tens of thousands of lightning bolts and struck in the direction of the palace. Everyone's gaze also looked at the palace. Inside the palace, the officials who were observing the weather saw the dense lightning bolts above their heads heading straight for them. All of them felt their scalps go numb and their guts go numb. Some of the weaker ones directly collapsed to the ground under the heavenly might and even fainted. In the rear hall of the Changle Palace, Li Mu's face was incomparably pale. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but he couldn't care less. The writing of the heavenly secret talisman had reached the most critical moment. The writing of the saint-level Motherf asterisk Ker this time was different from the time at White Cloud Mountain. Last time, Li Mu was in the special flask space. After he drew the Motherf asterisk Ker, the heavenly tribulation phenomenon appeared. This time, the heavenly tribulation appeared much faster than Li Mu had expected. Before the Motherf asterisk Ker was drawn, the tribulation clouds had already formed and condensed into the first wave of attacks. Thunder rumbled in his ears, but he couldn't afford to be distracted. If he was the slightest bit careless, 3 days of hard work and those precious talisman liquid would be wasted. Outside the Changle Palace, when the bolts of tribulation lightning were about to strike, the 4 walls of the divine capital suddenly flashed with a golden light. In the next moment, a golden light shield appeared above the divine capital and completely enveloped the divine capital. When the lightning bolts landed on the light shield, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no sound and no splash. Only then did some officials remember that the divine capital, as the capital of the great Zhou, was protected by a powerful array formation. Even if there were thousands of soldiers and horses, or even seventh realm cultivators, they wouldn't be able to break through it. After realizing this, they gradually felt relieved. However, they still couldn't help but look in the direction of the Changle Palace. The target of the Tribulation Lightning was obviously Changle Palace. What were Her Majesty and Li Mu doing inside? Why did they summon the heavenly tribulation? In the sky, the lightning bolts and the tribulation clouds had already begun to accumulate for the second time. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu finished the last stroke in an ethereal state. The Mother of Asterisk-Her on the table flashed with spiritual light and slowly floated up. The heavenly secret talisman was completed. A beam of white light shot out of Li Mu's body and entered the Empress's body. Li Mu's body and mind were already exhausted to the limit. Without the support of the Empress' primordial spirit, he felt the world spin and immediately fell to the ground. However, he didn't fall to the ground. Instead, he fell into a body with a faint fragrance. Zhou carried Li Mu to the bed and put him down. She said, "Rest first. Leave the rest to me." Li Mu was already exhausted to the extreme. He didn't have time to think about the soft princess Carrie just now. He closed his eyes and fell into a deep sleep. Zhou looked at Li Mu. He took off his shoes and placed them neatly by the bed. The blanket at the end of the bed also stretched out on its own and covered Li Mu's body. After doing all this, Zhou Yi's body disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, everyone in the divine capital saw an illusory figure rise rapidly from the palace and appear in the sky. As the illusory figure rose, it kept growing bigger and bigger. Soon, it was hundreds of feet tall. The illusory figure was wearing an imperial robe and an imperial crown. It floated above the palace. Because it was too tall, no one could see its face clearly. In the dark clouds, the second wave of tribulation lightning had already condensed and pressed down on the illusory figure. The illusory figure just pointed a finger, and the lightning immediately collapsed. At the same time, the frightening dark clouds in the sky also collapsed. After pointing a finger, the sky in the divine capital was clear and bright again. Countless people in the divine capital were deeply shocked by this scene. After they recovered from their shock, they immediately knelt on the ground and cheered loudly. "It's Her Majesty the Empress! Long live Her Majesty the Empress!" The scene just now had left an indelible memory in their hearts. Countless officials in the imperial court also couldn't recover from the shock for a long time. Although the Empress had always given them the impression that she was majestic and unapproachable, she rarely displayed her strength in front of the officials. As a result, they had almost forgotten that she was an ultimate powerhouse of the seventh realm. The heavenly tribulation that could destroy the entire divine capital was directly shattered by her pointing a finger. How powerful was this? At this moment, no matter if it was the officials of the new party or the old party, they could only submit to that indomitable figure in front of their hearts. After dispersing the tribulation clouds, the illusory figure quickly shrank and finally disappeared from the sky above the palace. Changle Palace. Li Mu didn't know how long he had slept. When he woke up again, he saw the Empress standing in front of the window. Zhou looked at him and said indifferently, "Open your mouth." Li Mu opened his mouth, and a ray of light flashed from her hand. A round thing appeared in Li Mu's mouth. It melted in an instant, and a pure medicinal power rushed to his limbs and bones. More than half of the magic power in his body was instantly recovered. Li Mu sat up on the bed and asked, "Your Majesty, how long have I slept?" Zhou said, "About a day and a night." Including the time he had been unconscious, it was a little longer than he expected. Li Mu got off the bed and said, "I'll go home first." Zhou said, "Your mind is seriously overdrawn. Rest for a while more." Li Mu shook his head and said, "No, I'll go home and rest. If I don't go back, my wife will be worried." Zhou waved her hand and said, "Go, go." As soon as she finished speaking, Li Mu felt his vision blur. The next moment, he appeared in his own courtyard. "Benefactor." "Young master." Xiao Bai and Wan Wan were swinging in the courtyard out of boredom. When they saw Li Mu, they immediately rushed over. Wan Wan hugged Li Mu's arm and said, "If you didn't come back, Miss would have gone to the palace to find you." Li Mu smiled embarrassedly at Lu Hanyin and Li Qing, who had just walked out of the room, and said, "I've made you worry." Li Qing was clearly relieved. Lu Hanyin walked up to him. Seeing his pale face, she whispered, "You're just a minor official, not the prime minister. Why do you have to work so hard?" Li Mu took her hand and said, "If it weren't for His Majesty, we wouldn't have everything we have today. We also wouldn't have been able to reverse the verdict and get revenge for Lord Li. Naturally, I have to repay His Majesty to the best of my ability. But you don't have to work so hard." Lu Hanyin looked at him reproachfully and said, "His Majesty doesn't know how to care about you. It's so difficult to reach the saint-level Fu Lu. What if you hurt your cultivation foundation?" Li Mu smiled and said, "His Majesty is very good to me. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll recover after a few days of rest." In Changle Palace, Zhou Yi looked angry. She gritted her teeth and said, "Only you know how to care about him. So what if you married?" Chapter 391. Not long after Li Mu returned home, the Empress asked Mr. Mei to send over some elixirs to strengthen one's foundation. Although he borrowed the Empress's power when he drew talismans, the mental exhaustion was his own. The saint-level Fu Lu was something that far exceeded the limits of Li Mu's current ability. After every talisman he drew, he had to rest for a long time before he could draw the second one. When he reached level 6, and his cultivation increased greatly, drawing saint-level talismans would no longer have such serious aftereffects. But that would be a long time in the future. Due to various opportunities, his cultivation had increased rapidly in the past 2 years. He had completed a path that others would take a lifetime to complete. For his cultivation after the 5th realm, unless he encountered a great opportunity, such as the Emperor's Qi in the Great Zhou Ancestral Temple, which he coincidentally absorbed, then there was a certain possibility that he could immediately become a 7th realm cultivator like the Empress. Otherwise, he would have to take one step at a time on the path of cultivation in the future and walk down the same path as the Empress. However, he didn't plan to draw too many talismans in the short term. This talisman was to prove to the sloppy old Taoist and the 2 high priests that he had the ability to do so. They had had enough of it. Li Mu rested for a night. The next morning, he came to the Department of Offerings again. He walked in front of the sloppy Taoist priest and stretched out his hand. A Fu Lu floated above his palm. The moment the Fu Lu appeared, the space here seemed to distort. The talisman of divine secrets. The sloppy Taoist priest was shocked. Yesterday's vision was indeed caused by the birth of the saint-level Fu Lu. He subconsciously reached out to take it, but the Fu Lu disappeared in Li Mu's hand. Li Mu smiled and said, "As long as you stay in the Department of Offerings for a year, I will give you the talisman of divine secrets with both hands after a year." The sloppy Taoist priest glanced at him and didn't raise any objections. There was no doubt that he wouldn't be able to get the talisman after a year. Li Mu represented the Great Zhou Court, so it was impossible for the Great Zhou Court to lie to him about this matter. They would not, nor would they dare to. What Li Mu wanted was for the slovenly Taoist priest to remain in the Department of Worship for a year. As for whether he was sleeping here or doing something else, it didn't matter. His use to the Department of Offerings was like a nuclear bomb to a country in another world. Whether or not he needed it did not matter, but it was a necessity. Moreover, compared to swindling people on the streets of the divine capital and enduring the sun and rain, he was allowed to live in a spacious mansion, have servants to serve him, have a respectable status, and after a year, he was even given a treasure that countless cultivators coveted. If he didn't contribute to the Department of Offerings, how could he feel at ease? To high-level cultivators, this was a great karma. If they were tainted by the karma, but had no effect, it would have a great impact on their future path of cultivation. Hoarding for free did not exist for them. The more they hoard for free now, the more they would have to repay in the future. Li Mu walked into the courtyard and saw 2 figures standing there. He looked at the 2 old men and asked, Have the two of you finished thinking? The two great reverends nodded at the same time. The thin old man said, "We've finished thinking. After so many years, us two brothers have already treated the Department of Offerings as our home. How can we just leave like this? Although staying in the Department of Offerings would be somewhat restricted, even if they joined a sect, they would still have to contribute to the sect. There is no sect that didn't ask them to do anything for the sect, but would provide them with large amounts of cultivation resources. And if they worked for the Great Joe Court, they would be able to obtain the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets, extending their lifespan by 10 years before the end of their lives. This was a benefit that they could not obtain from any sect. Just for this reason alone, they could not leave the Department of Offerings. Limu looked at the two and said awkwardly, "But the state treasury is tight. I'm afraid it can't provide you with as many cultivation resources as before. At the Sixth Realm, the resources that the Great Joe Court provided for them are not enough to accelerate their cultivation in the first place. If they ran out of resources, then so be it. Compared to that, the Talisman of Heavenly Secrets was the most important." The thin old man said seriously, "Although the two of us were not born in the Great Joe, in our hearts, we've already treated the Great Joe as our second home. We hope to do something for the Great Joe. We don't need any spiritual jade or spiritual herbs." Limu smiled and said, "The Department of Offerings welcomes the two great reverends back." Of course, Limu would not refuse a Sixth Realm expert who had delivered themselves to his door for free. The more experts there were in the Department of Offerings, the better. The more powerful the Department of Offerings would be, and he would be one step closer to his dream of subduing the demon nation, pacifying the ghost realm, and destroying the demon sect. After fulfilling his promise to the Empress, he would be able to take his wives and entangle them to the ends of the earth. At present, Lu Hanyin had already become the head wife of the Li clan. He and Li Qing were still at the stage of holding hands and hugging each other. This was because compared to Li Qing, Lu Hanyin was more open and proactive. For the sake of dual cultivation, she climbed over Li Mu's window and climbed into his bed in the middle of the night. Before the two of them confirmed their relationship, Lu Hanyin was already capable of doing such things. If Li Qing was half as proactive as she was, she might be the head wife of the Li clan now. However, this was due to the difference in their personalities. It cannot be forced. Getting along with Li Qing had to be done step by step. If Lu Hanyin hadn't disturbed them yesterday, they might have already progressed from hugging each other to kissing and hugging each other. Li Mu suspected that Lu Hanyin was deliberately causing trouble, but he had no evidence. He had originally planned to continue what he hadn't finished yesterday with Li Qing tonight. However, when he returned home, he saw Hyun Jinko in the courtyard. After asking Hyun Jinko, Li Mu found out that he was here on the orders of the sect master to bring Li Qing and Lu Hanyin back to Mount Baiyan. Although the sect master had only taken Li Qing as his disciple as a temporary measure, this matter was already known to everyone. In everyone's hearts, Li Qing was the disciple of the Fulu School's sect master. As one of the 6 Taoist sects, the Fulu School's sect master naturally couldn't be careless about accepting a disciple. This time, Hyun Jinko was bringing Li Qing back to the mountain for the purpose of holding the disciple acceptance ceremony. At that time, apart from the sect masters and elders of the various sects of the Fulu School, the other 5 Taoist sects, such as the Danding sect, the Spirit Array sect, the Xuanzong sect, the South sect, and the North sect, would also send important figures to participate in the ceremony. Lu Hanyin would also participate in this ceremony. When Yu Zhenzi had taken her as his disciple, although he had extorted the Fulu School once, he hadn't held the disciple acceptance ceremony. This was because this kind of ceremony was only held by grand elders or first seats whose cultivation had reached the 7th realm. Yu Zhenzi's cultivation had originally been at the peak of the 6th realm. After returning to the mountain this time and receiving Mount Baiyun's inheritance, he had already successfully advanced to the 7th realm. Her and Xian Jizi's disciple acceptance ceremony would be held together. Hyun Jinko looked at Li Mu and asked, "Junior brother, do you want to return to the mountain with us?" During this ceremony, Senior Brother Sect Master should introduce some experts from the other 5 sects to you. Li Mu thought for a moment and asked, When will the ceremony be held? Hyun Jinko said, the ceremony needs to be prepared, and the other 5 sects, including the South Sect, the North Sect, the Xuanzong Sect, and the others, will all need time. The soonest will be 3 months later. Li Mu asked, then why don't we pick them up 3 months later? Hyun Jinko said, Senior Brother Sect Master's intention is to take advantage of these 3 months to raise martial niece Li Qing's cultivation to the 5th realm as soon as possible. Senior Sister has just advanced. According to the rules, she has to visit the other 5 sects one by one. She plans to bring martial niece Lu to see the world. Lu Hanyin and Li Qing were both going to leave. In that case, Li Mu would have to stay in an empty room for at least the next 3 months. They both had important matters to attend to. Li Mu could not force them to stay by his side. Although Lu Hanyin and Li Qing had different personalities, they had the same desire to be strong. Li Mu and Lu Hanyin's cultivation were both at the 5th realm. Although Li Qing did not show it, Li Mu knew that she also had an urgent desire to improve her strength. As for Lu Hanyin, she would not be satisfied. In the future, her life would be to play the zither and cook. She also had her own cultivation. Li Mu looked at them and said, then you two go. I will return in a few days. The court has been busy recently. I can't leave. The matter of the Department of Worship was not over. Li Mu planned to abolish the old system of worship and introduce a new set of rules. This was not something that could be done in 2 or 3 days. He needed to discuss it with the Empress before he could finalize it. Lu Hanyin called Wan and Xiao Bai into her room. No one knew what they said. Li Qing glanced at Li Mu and said, I have something to say to you. Li Mu followed her into the room and asked, what? Li Qing turned around, stood on her tiptoes, and kissed Li Mu on the lips. Their lips touched. Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then hugged her waist tightly. There were not many words. Their lips pressed together for a long time and did not separate. It was as if they both wanted to melt into each other's bodies. It was not until Lu Hanyin snorted outside that Li Qing let go of Li Mu somewhat awkwardly and ran out with a red face. Lu Hanyin extended a hand to Li Qing and said unhappily, look at you. You don't look like the Constable Li of the past. Let's go. Li Qing held her hand and turned around to look at Li Mu. Only then did she leave with her. This was not the first time that Li Mu had parted with Li Qing and Lu Hanyin. However, the 2 times they parted, his emotions were completely different. After parting with Li Qing in Yangqiu County, they had gone their separate ways. He did not know if they would meet again. The parting in Luoyang was only temporary. Li Mu knew very well that they would meet again very soon. The last time he parted with Lu Hanyin, it was because they were both weak and helpless. The incident where Li Mu faced off against Chu Jiang of Gojoseon alone had left a huge shadow in Lu Hanyin's heart. It made her want to urgently improve her strength. Now, the situation was completely different from that time. Whether it was Li Mu or her, if they were to face off against Chu Jiang of Gojoseon again, the latter would definitely be the one in a difficult situation. These days, each of them had been working hard for their own futures. They had also completed their growth and transformation. After Lu Hanyin and Li Qing left, Li Mu looked at Wan and Xiao Bai and asked, what did she say to you just now? Xiao Bai immediately said, Sister Lu said that when she and Sister Qing are not around, we should look after our benefactor and not let our benefactor provoke other little vixens in Loya. Wan covered Xiao Bai's mouth and said, Miss said that we can't tell young master. Li Mu spanked her, and said unhappily, do you only have eyes for your miss? Wan covered her butt and said with grievance, young master already is Xiao Bai. Don't provoke other vixens. She blinked her big clear eyes. There was a pleading look in her eyes. Li Mu met her gaze and almost lost his mind. He covered Wan's eyes and pressed down on her, but a few more times. He said angrily, how many times have I told you not to use your eye technique on me? Chapter 392. With Lu Hanyin by her side, Wan's progress was also very fast. Although her cultivation level was still at the 3rd realm, her ocular techniques were becoming more and more powerful. Even Li Mu couldn't control himself after looking at her pair of big, watery eyes for a long time. Lu Hanyin left, but Wan was left behind to act as Li Mu's spy. Fortunately, Li Mu had Xiaobai. In this family, she was the only one who was wholeheartedly loyal to him. Okay. Li Mu put Wan down and asked, "They're gone. There are only 3 of us. What are we eating tonight?" Wan became energized at the mention of food. She rubbed her, but as she hugged Li Mu's arm and said, "Let's eat barbecued meat." "No, let's eat hot pot again." "No, barbecued meat again." How about hot pot again?" Wan was very conflicted about whether to eat hot pot or barbecued meat. In the end, Li Mu decided to eat hot pot and barbecued meat at the same time. After eating and drinking to their fill, she and Xiaobai cleaned up and washed the dishes. Li Mu went to the backyard and continued to repair the law bell. A complete law bell was very important to him. The sooner he repaired it, the sooner his family's safety would be completely guaranteed. However, he knew that those small spells that had never appeared in this world were almost used up. If the law bell couldn't be completely repaired before they were used up, he could only wait for it to slowly repair itself. However, if that was the case, he didn't know how long he would have to wait. A year or even several years was very likely. And this was under the condition that Li Mu had already repaired most of the cracks. If it weren't for Li Mu's intervention, it would probably take dozens or even hundreds of years just by relying on its self-repair ability. The next day, Li Mu went to the palace as usual. There wasn't much to do in the Imperial Secretariat recently. Li Mu handled his own business in the Imperial Secretariat in the morning. In the afternoon, he went to Changle Palace to help the Empress approve memorials and discuss the reform of the Department of Imperial Offerings with her. In Changle Palace, Li Mu sat at the side, carefully reading the important memorials. Zhou Yi leaned lazily on the dragon throne, reading a book called Strange Stories from a Chinese Studio. Occasionally, she would raise her head to look at Li Mu. Seeing that he was seriously correcting the memorials, she lowered her head again to read. By the time Zhou Yi came to her senses, she had already been in the yamen for a long time. She looked up at Li Mu again and asked, "It's been a quarter of an hour. Why haven't you gone back yet?" Li Mu flipped open a new memorial. Without raising his head, he said, "My wife has returned to Mount Baiyun. I'm not in a hurry to return today. I'll read a few more memorials." Zhou Yi unconsciously sat up straight and asked, "Which wife?" "Li Mu." Both of them went. "How long will you be gone?" 3 or 4 months. Zhou Yi put down the book in her hand and said, "Then you're not in a hurry to go back. Finish reading these memorials first." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that won't do. Xiaobai and Wan are still waiting for me to eat at home." Zhou Yi said, "I'll have the Mei Wei bring them to the palace. I haven't seen the little fox in a long time. I'll also order the Imperial kitchen to prepare some food. In a while, you can all eat at my place." Li Mu was stunned for a moment. Then, he could only nod and say, Then, okay. It seemed that ever since Lu Hanyin came to Chengdu, the Empress hadn't gone to the Li Manor. In any case, there was no one at home. It didn't make much of a difference if he went back sooner or later. It was better to work overtime in the palace and get a working meal. Soon, Mr. Mei went to the Li Manor to pick up Wan and Xiaobai. It was Wan's first time entering the palace. At first, she was a little reserved. However, under the influence of Xiaobai, she soon became relaxed. The chatter of the 2 girls brought some liveliness to the usually lifeless Changle Palace. Li Mu noticed that when the Empress looked at Wan and Xiaobai, who were chasing each other in Changle Palace, there was a faint smile at the corner of her mouth. Li Mu's impression of the Empress was that she rarely smiled. At most, she was expressionless. Perhaps she saw her own teenage years in Wan and Xiaobai. However, their teenage years should be different. Wan and Xiaobai were at the age of innocence. At the Empress age, she should have become the crown princess and officially started her unfortunate life. While Li Mu was reviewing the reports, the Empress took Wan and Xiaobai to the Imperial Garden to admire the flowers. Mr. Mei once said that the flowers in the Imperial Garden were all planted by the Empress herself. Planting and nurturing flowers was her greatest hobby. Who didn't like these beautiful things? If he really had the chance to kidnap the Empress in the future and live in seclusion with her, he would let her plant flowers all around the house. Every day, when he opened the door, he would reap the joy of the whole day. After finishing the last report, Li Mu left Changle Palace and walked towards the Imperial Garden. Although he had been to Changle Palace more than 100 times, his fixed route was from the Secretariat to Changle Palace. He had never been to other places. Fortunately, Li Mu knew the direction of the Imperial Garden. After walking out of Changle Palace, he walked in a direction. After a few hundred steps, Li Mu suddenly sensed something and stopped in his tracks. He turned to look at a palace next to him. His heart was pounding. Suddenly, he had a strong urge to step into this palace. It seemed that there was something in this palace that was attracting him. Li Mu looked up at the top of the palace and saw the words Ancestral Temple. He subconsciously walked towards the palace, but before he could get close, a loud shout suddenly came from the palace. Get lost. At the same time, a strong aura swept out from the palace and pressed down on Li Mu. Li Mu took a few steps back. His hair fluttered behind him, and his clothes fluttered. However, he also condensed an extremely strong force on his body. The two forces collided and formed a powerful impact. In the sky, several floating clouds suddenly scattered. At the same time, Li Mu's telekinesis condensed into force. A dragon's roar came from the palace. Then, a golden light suddenly flew out. It was a golden dragon. After flying out of the palace, it rushed towards Li Mu. The golden dragon was very fast. Li Mu had no time to dodge, nor did he try to. He did not feel any threat from the golden dragon. The golden dragon flew to Li Mu's side and instantly wrapped around his body. In the next moment, Li Mu's expression changed slightly. He felt that the telekinesis he had accumulated was quickly flowing into the golden dragon's body. Li Mu controlled his telekinesis so that it would not be taken away by the golden dragon. He grabbed the golden dragon's body with one hand, wanting to fling it away. However, his hand passed through the golden dragon's body. The dragon was actually an illusory object. It did not have a physical body at all. Seeing that the telekinesis he had painstakingly accumulated was about to be taken away by the dragon, Li Mu made up his mind and used the guiding technique to compete with it. The man and the dragon were evenly matched in the contest for the telekinesis. Neither could do anything to the other. At this moment, 3 figures walked out of the palace. The 3 of them were old men with white hair and beards. They wore crowns on their heads, which were different from the Empress's crown. They wore black dragon robes, and the golden dragon embroidered on their banners only had 4 claws. What shocked Li Mu was that the powerful aura emitted from the 3 of them was not weaker than the scruffy Taoist priests. There were actually 3 peak 6th realm experts in the palace. Seeing the golden dragon coiling around Li Mu's body, an old man's face darkened. He said coldly, "Those who disturb the Emperor's aura should be punished by death." He stretched out a withered finger and pointed at Li Mu from afar. A powerful force of heaven and earth quickly gathered. An illusory finger appeared in front of Li Mu's eyes. A terrifying aura was emitted from the finger. He was about to summon the Tao Bell to defend himself when a figure appeared in front of him. At this moment, the old man's right index finger had already pressed down. Crack! His outstretched finger was directly broken. He ignored his broken finger and looked at the figure in front of Li Mu in shock and anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "What are you doing?" The Empress looked at the 3 of them indifferently and said, "Go back." Then, she waved her hand gently. A powerful force swept the 3 old men back. The Empress glanced at the golden dragon again. The golden dragon trembled and quickly scurried back into the palace. It was only now that Li Mu sensed the golden dragon's abnormality. He looked in the direction of the palace and muttered, "Your Majesty, this is," the Empress said, "Emperor's aura." It was not the first time Li Mu had heard the name Emperor's aura. The Empress had been able to reach 7th realm because she had obtained it. However, he had only heard of Emperor's aura before. Today was the first time he had seen it. It was said that Emperor's aura was born from the telekinesis of the people of the 36 counties. Li Mu did not realize it earlier, but now he realized that the golden dragon itself was formed from telekinesis. However, The telekinesis was too vast and had already given birth to a spirit. The so-called Emperor's aura was the telekinesis spirit. If Li Mu absorbed a few more decades of telekinesis, his body should also give birth to a telekinesis spirit. This damned telekinesis spirit. It already had so much telekinesis, yet it still coveted this little bit from him. Wasn't it too greedy? However, it was the first time Li Mu had seen such a vast amount of telekinesis. If he had enough spiritual jades, he only needed to swallow this telekinesis spirit and probably reach 6th realm immediately. If this telekinesis spirit completely matured, it would not be impossible for him to reach 7th realm immediately. The Empress looked at Li Mu and asked, "Do you want to go in and take a look?" Li Mu paused and nodded slightly. He followed the Empress to the entrance of the palace. 3 old men stood in the palace. The leader said in a low voice, "This is the ancestral temple. Those who are not members of the royal family cannot enter." The Empress looked at them calmly. "I'll let him in. Do you have any objections?" The old man said, "We are the guardians of the ancestral temple. If you want to let an outsider in, you have to step over our dead bodies first." The Empress looked at Mr. Mei, who was waiting outside the palace, and said, "Mei Wei, arrange for someone to come and collect the body." After saying that, the other 2 old men pulled the old man away, one on the left and one on the right. "Royal brother, forget it. It's not a big deal. Didn't the Zhou family also coming back then? If he wants to see, let him see. It's not like he'll lose anything." Chapter 393. The 3 elders walked to the corner of the hall and sat down cross-legged on the futons. Li Mu followed the Empress into the hall. This hall was bigger than Li Mu had imagined. After walking in, the first thing that caught his eye was a high platform in the innermost part of the hall. On the high platform, there are many memorial tablets. Li Mu glanced at them and saw that the names of the past emperors of the Great Zhou were written on the tablets. The one at the top was the founder of the Great Zhou, the founding emperor of the Great Zhou. The one at the bottom was the former emperor. The former crown prince had his power taken away by the Zhou family before he had officially inherited the throne, so he was not qualified to be listed. Below the high platform were 2 rows of small cauldrons. Li Mu counted. There were 36 cauldrons in total, the same number as the counties of the Great Zhou. Traces of golden light were drawn out of the small cauldrons and gathered in a large cauldron in the center of the hall. The golden dragon was swimming in the cauldron. Although it looked at the Empress with fear in its golden eyes, when it looked at Li Mu, its eyes were full of greed. Li Mu looked at the golden dragon, and some other thoughts arose in his mind. After reaching the 5th level, his cultivation had become very slow, so slow that he could barely feel any progress. If he could swallow this golden dragon, he could immediately reach the 6th level, which was worth at least 20 years of cultivation. Feeling Li Mu's gaze, the greed in the golden dragon's eyes immediately disappeared without a trace. With a whoosh, it dived into the cauldron and did not show its head again. Li Mu looked at the small cauldrons and asked the Empress, "Your Majesty, these cauldrons should correspond to the national temples of the 36 counties, right?" Zhou nodded slightly. Li Mu looked at the small cauldrons and found that the golden light on them varied in intensity, brightness, and darkness. The strongest one was so dazzling that he could not look directly at it. The weakest one was only a thin ray, so dim that it seemed to be about to go out. The small cauldron that shone the brightest was connected to Zhong County, where Luoyang was located. In the past year, many changes had happened in Luoyang. The people of Zhong County were united like never before. The further the counties were from the fairy's capital, the dimmer the light from the small cauldron connected to them. Only a few counties were slightly brighter. This meant that there was still a long way to go before he could fully condense the Emperor Qi. The golden dragon quickly flew out of the cauldron and circled around the Empress's head a few times before flying back into the cauldron. Li Mu noticed that all the psychokinesis on the Empress's body had been sucked away by it. As a king who was deeply loved by the people, the Empress's psychic power was no less than Li Mu's. Li Mu was a little angry when he saw this. The psychokinesis on the Empress was something that both Li Mu and her had worked hard for a long time. It was not easy for them to condense it, but it was all for someone else. He felt injustice for the Empress. After visiting the ancestral temple, Li Mu didn't stay here for long and walked out with the Empress. Not long after the two walked out, in the corner of the ancestral temple, 3 elders who were sitting cross-legged on prayer mats with their eyes closed slowly opened their eyes. One of the elders snorted. "Is this still the crown princess? She has changed. She wouldn't be so disrespectful to us in the past." Another elder said, "She was set up by the Zhou family to inherit the Emperor Qi and almost died. Sitting in this position, she was already full of resentment. How can her personality not change?" The last elder said slowly, "That's not important. In the past 6 months, the speed of condensing the Emperor Qi has obviously increased. I'm afraid it will mature again in 20 years. We need to urge them to work hard and cultivate. If they can enter the 6th realm, then they will have full confidence to refine the Emperor Qi." Changel Palace. Li Mu, Wanwan, Xiao Bai, and the Empress were eating hot pot together. After walking around the ancestral temple with the Empress, Li Mu gained a lot of knowledge. So this was how the Emperor Qi that was related to the inheritance of the great Zhou came about. It was no wonder that when the people of the 36 counties sent the People's Blood Letter, both the old and new parties chose to give in. If the imperial court completely lost the people's hearts, the state temples in the various counties would not be able to absorb psychokinesis. Naturally, there would be no way to send it to the ancestral temple, which would delay the condensation of the Emperor Qi. The 3 elders in the ancestral temple were members of the Xiao royal family. Their status was extremely high, and their seniority was even higher than that of the previous emperor. The 3 of them were all at the peak of the 6th realm. It seemed that the old party's strength was still far stronger than the new party's. What the Zhou family relied on was their blood relationship with the Empress. Li Mu thought of a question and asked, "Your Majesty, why don't you absorb the Emperor Qi yourself? Will it allow you to enter the 8th realm?" Zhou Yi blew on the tofu and said no. Li Mu thought and said, "But your Majesty is so young. You could be the emperor for another 100 years. There's no need to pass the throne." "Zhou," he said indifferently, "because I don't like it." Li Mu sighed. He only felt that it was unfair for her. She did not want to be the emperor, but she took on the responsibility of being the emperor. From the beginning to the end, when the Zhou family was planning, they never asked if what they gave was what she wanted. At this moment, Zhou Yi looked at him again and said, "Unless you're willing to approve the memorial for 100 years, Li Mu picked up a piece of tofu and put it into his mouth. He did not care that it was hot and said decisively, "Since your Majesty doesn't like it, it's fine if you don't want to be the emperor. When the time comes, you can pass the throne to whoever you want. If your Majesty is willing, you can be my neighbor. We can open up 2 plots of land in front of the courtyard." Xiaobai nodded and said, Okay. I also want to be Big Sister Zhou's neighbor." Zhou, he patted her head and said, "Why don't you 2 not go back tonight? There are many empty rooms in Changel Palace. You can sleep here." Xiaobai looked at Li Mu. She had to ask for Li Mu's opinion no matter what. After seeing the scene in the ancestral shrine, Li Mu felt even more sorry for the Empress. He nodded and said, "Then you can sleep here." The Empress looked at Li Mu and said, "You don't have to go back either." Li Mu was stunned and asked, "Your Majesty, this is not very good, right?" "Zhou," he said, "in any case, you have to enter the palace tomorrow morning. Just stay here. It's not the first time." What she said was somewhat reasonable. Changel Palace was only 100 steps away from the Secretariat. It was much closer than home, so he could sleep for a while longer. But since ancient times, who would allow an official to sleep in the palace? The Empress didn't seem to think this was a big deal. She looked at Wanwan and said, "And this little girl, she can also stay in the palace." Wanwan looked hesitant and said, But Miss said that young master has to go home every night." "He can't stay out all night," Xiaobai said, "but we're also with Benefactor. We're staying at Big Sister Zhou's house. We're not some vixen." Wanwan was still hesitant. The Empress continued, "For breakfast tomorrow morning, You can also eat in the palace. There are dozens of pastries in the imperial kitchen. You could try them all. Wanwan grabbed Xiaobai's hand and said, I think you're right. Even if Miss knows, she won't blame us. Xiaobai and Wanwan both agreed. Li Mu's opinion was not important. It wasn't 2-1, but 3-1. In any case, Lu Hanyin and Li Qing weren't here. Xiaobai and Wanwan were with him. There was no one waiting for him at home. It didn't make any difference whether he went back or not. Tonight, Li Mu still slept in the back hall. When he closed his eyes and cultivated in his room, he could hear a girl's giggles coming from the front hall. Li Mu had spent more time in Changle Palace than he had at home, so he knew very well that this palace was cold and lonely most of the time. Even when he was here, he and the Empress were both busy with their own things. Li Mu was reviewing memorials. The Empress was either reading or relaxing. The palace was as quiet as ever. After Wanwan and Xiaobai arrived, it was no longer as lively as before. Li Mu didn't cultivate until very late. He prepared to rest. Not long ago, he had drawn a saint-level Fulu. His exhausted state of mind had not completely recovered. He still needed a period of quiet rest. Not long after Li Mu lay down, he seemed to sense something and sat up from the bed. He got off the bed and walked to the door. When he opened the door, he saw Wanwan and Xiaobai, wrapped in blankets, standing on either side of the door. Li Mu asked in confusion, What are you two standing here for? Wanwan wrapped the blanket tightly around her and whispered, We can't sleep. Xiaobai continued, Can we sleep with our benefactor? One of them had a pitiful expression on her face, while the other looked at Li Mu with her big, watery eyes. Li Mu opened the door and said helplessly, Come in. The two figures immediately ran into Li Mu's room. They placed their blankets on the chair and crawled into Li Mu's bed. Fortunately, the bed in Changle Palace was very big. Even if 3 people slept on it, it wouldn't seem crowded. Li Mu had reason to suspect that this bed was originally built by the previous emperor for the convenience of sleeping with his concubines. This might also be the reason why Wanwan and Xiaobai couldn't sleep. In fact, when people slept, they only needed a small quiet room and a small bed. An overly spacious bedroom with an overly big bed wouldn't be able to sleep well. Perhaps this was the reason why the Empress didn't sleep in the middle of the night and always met Li Mu in his dreams. How lonely would it be if he was the only one sleeping in such a big Changle Palace? Li Mu couldn't bear just thinking about it. The Empress had already been like this for 4 years. Looking at Wanwan and Xiaobai lying on the bed with only their heads sticking out, Li Mu suddenly didn't know how to sleep. If he slept next to Wanwan, Xiaobai would definitely be disappointed. If he slept next to Xiaobai, the one who would be disappointed would be Wanwan. Sleeping between the two of them, surrounded by the soft bodies of young girls, he had never experienced such a situation. Even if he forced himself to sleep, he wouldn't be able to sleep. Li Mu covered them with the blankets and said, You two sleep first. I'll go out for a while. He put on his clothes and prepared to go out to the courtyard to get some fresh air. When he walked out, he saw a figure sitting on the roof of the front hall. From Li Mu's angle, a full moon rose behind her. She sat there quietly like a fairy in the moon. She was beautiful, but also seemed especially lonely. The night was long. He wasn't the only one who didn't have the heart to sleep. Li Mu thought for a moment and flew up. Standing on the roof of Changle Palace, Li Mu realized that Changle Palace seemed to be at the highest point of the imperial palace. Standing here and looking down, he could see the entire imperial palace. He walked to the Empress's side and said softly, Your Majesty, are you still not sleeping? Zhou looked ahead and said indifferently, You're not sleeping either, are you? Li Mu said, I'll go to sleep now. Sit down. Zhou spoke again in a tone that brooked no refusal. Talk with me for a while. Li Mu sat down beside him and asked, Is there something on your mind, Your Majesty? If she wasn't sleeping in the middle of the night, there must be something on her mind. The more meticulous a person was, the easier it was for them to be troubled. Zhou looked at the moon in the sky and asked, Who do you think I should pass the throne to? The Xiao clan or the Zhou clan? Li Mu shook his head and said, I don't dare to speak rashly. Zhou said, Say it, there's no one here. As a subject, he shouldn't answer this question. However, after she said that there was no ruler and subject on the roof of Changle Palace, there was only Zhou, Yi, and Li Mu. There was something that Li Mu had been holding in his heart for a long time. As a friend, he had the need to tell her what was on his mind. Then I'll say it, say it. Li Mu turned to look at the Empress and asked very confusedly, to the Xiao clan, Your Majesty is an outsider. To the Zhou clan, Your Majesty is also an outsider. Instead of passing the throne to an outsider, why don't we have one ourselves? As soon as he finished speaking, he saw the Empress's stunned expression. Only then did Li Mu realize that there was a loophole in his words. When he said we, it meant that they were on the same side, not that he and the Empress had a child. To prevent the Empress from misunderstanding, Li Mu quickly explained, Your Majesty, please don't misunderstand. What I mean is, I'll give birth to mine, you give birth to yours. Chapter 394. Late at night, on the roof of the Changle Palace, Zhou Yi looked calmly at Li Mu and asked, Has it been a long time since I taught you cultivation? Li Mu knew what she meant by cultivation and immediately said, You told me to be straightforward. If you blame me now, I won't say anything in the future. Zhou Yi looked at him and finally looked away. I am the Empress, Li Mu said. The Empress also has the right to pursue love. Although she had already been married once, who said that the Empress couldn't marry again? In another world, that woman first married the father, then the son, and had countless men. Compared to her, the Empress was like a pure Xiao Bai flower. So what if she had an Empress? Li Mu said seriously, Your Majesty is a disgrace to the Xiao family. How could they tolerate the throne being taken by a woman with a different surname? If the Xiao family takes power in the future, Your Majesty will certainly not leave any good words in the history books. And for the descendants of the Zhou family, Your Majesty is only their elder sister. How could you be closer to Your Majesty's own children? In fact, Li Mu had a little selfish motive here. History was written by the victors. It could be foreseen that whether it was the Zhou family or the Xiao family who passed the throne, the Empress would probably not leave any good words in the history books revised by future generations. Then, as the only favored official of the Empress's era, how would the history books evaluate Li Mu? Bewitching the Emperor, treacherous officials in power, and favored officials causing chaos. Some unofficial history books might even smear the relationship between him and the Empress. Li Mu didn't intend to give them such a chance. He looked at the Empress and continued, Moreover, the Zhou family and the Xiao family, for the sake of the throne, formed cliques and pursued selfish interests, regardless of the consequences. It wasn't easy for us to make up for the mistakes of the previous emperor. If Your Majesty passes the throne to them, won't the great Zhou repeat the same mistakes? Zhou Yi was silent for a while, then stood up and said, I'm going to sleep. Li Mu said, Good night, Your Majesty. After Zhou Yi left, Li Mu sat on the roof and watched the moon for a while before returning to his room. Wan and Xiao Bai were still awake. They were giggling under the covers. Li Mu walked to the bed and asked, Why haven't you slept yet? Xiao Bai said, We're waiting for our benefactor to return. After saying that, she and Wan moved outwards and inwards respectively, leaving space in the middle for Li Mu. Li Mu waved his hand and said, You guys sleep. I'll sleep on the floor. Xiao Bai hugged Li Mu's arm and said, Then let's sleep on the floor too. Wan also got up from the bed and said, Young master will sleep on the ground and we will sleep on the bed. If young miss finds out, she will say that we don't know the rules. Li Mu didn't know how the Empress slept that night, but he slept very soundly. Wan was on his left and Xiao Bai was on his right. The bed was soft and fragrant, but when he woke up in the morning, his arms were a little numb. The Empress had already asked the kitchen to prepare pastries. Wan was shocked by the variety of breakfast. She had never thought that someone could have such a rich breakfast. In the past, she would feel very happy if she could eat 2 buns and an egg in the morning. Before breakfast was finished, she asked Li Mu indirectly where they were going to sleep tonight. After breakfast, Li Mu didn't let them go back. After all, it was just the 2 of them at home. Changle Palace was much bigger than the Li Mansion, so they didn't feel bored here. With Shangguan Li and Mr. Mei accompanying them, Li Mu felt that they were too happy to miss home. He went to the secretariat. When he passed by the Zongjing Temple, Zhang Chun came out and asked in surprise, "Where did you go last night?" Li Mu naturally couldn't tell him that he stayed in Changle Palace last night, so he said, "At home." Zhang Chun said, "I went to your house last night, but you weren't there." Li Mu said, "I went back very late last night. It was almost midnight." Then he asked, "Why are you looking for me?" Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "I wanted to have a drink with you, but it's fine now." Zhang Chun also didn't tell Li Mu that he was chased out of the house by his wife last night. He originally wanted to find Li Mu to stay the night, but he didn't see Li Mu come back even when he waited at the entrance of the Li residence until midnight. Obviously, he was lying. Li Mu said, "If there's nothing else, I'm going back to the secretariat." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Looking at Li Mu's back as he left, he thought about something in his heart. Yesterday, he saw that Lu Hanyin and Li Qing left Shendu, which was why he chose to stay in the Li mansion. But on the night his wife left, Li Mu didn't come back. What did he do? Could it be that he met another woman in private? No. As far as he knew, Li Mu couldn't be such a person. At a certain moment, a light suddenly flashed in Zhang Chun's mind. The Zongjing Temple was located behind the secretariat. If Li Mu came from the palace gate, it was impossible for him to pass by here, unless he came from another direction. Zhang Chun looked in the direction Li Mu came from. If he walked straight from here, he would reach Changle Palace. And Changle Palace was His Majesty's bedroom. He showed a look of realization on his face and said in shock, "So fast." Prince Shou walked over from the direction of the palace gate and said, "Old Zhang, why are you here so early today? Come, play a few rounds with me." Zhang Chun followed behind Prince Shou and walked into the Zongjing Temple. He asked casually, "Your Highness, wasn't Prince Nanyang beheaded? What happened to his mansion?" Prince Shou said, "It was temporarily conferred by the imperial court. In the future, it may be awarded to officials who have made great contributions to the imperial court." "Why are you asking this?" Zhang Chun smiled and said, "Nothing. I'm just asking. After returning to the secretariat, Li Mu didn't delay. He seized the time to draft the new rules of the Department of Consecration. After finishing his own business in the morning, he still had to show the Empress the memorials in the afternoon. Now, she didn't worry about the imperial court at all. She left the small matters to Li Mu, and they discussed the important matters together. If they agreed, they would listen to her. If they disagreed, they would listen to Li Mu. When Li Mu was dealing with the memorials, she was idling on the side. She even wanted Li Mu to write a few more books for her to read. It had to be said that she was already acting like a self-indulgent ruler, and Li Mu himself was about to become a favored official of a dictatorship. After the preliminary draft of the new rules of the Department of Consecration was finished, a familiar figure stepped into Li Mu's duty room. Mr. Mei looked a little tired. Li Mu poured a cup of tea for him and asked, "What's wrong? Didn't sleep well last night?" Mr. Mei sat in Li Mu's seat. He leaned against the chair and rubbed the space between his eyebrows. He said, "Last night I dealt with the internal guards until very late." Li Mu stood across from him and said, "If it's not too important, just leave it to your subordinates. Look at Her Majesty. She should be busier than you, but look at her. She's very idle every day. If she's not admiring flowers, she's reading books. How long has it been since she touched the memorials?" Mr. Mei glanced at him and asked, "Her Majesty has only let you read the memorials for a few days, and you're already unwilling?" Li Mu said, "It's not that I don't want to. Anyway, if I do more, Her Majesty will do less. As long as she's happy, it's fine. She doesn't have to worry about the memorials and give her inner demons an opportunity to take advantage of her. I suspect that her inner demons came from reading the memorials every day." Mr. Mei didn't continue this topic. He asked, "Did you say something again that made Her Majesty unhappy?" Li Mu said frankly, "I just said a few words of truth. Although the Empress's status was high, in the entire imperial court, there were only 3 people who could be considered her own: Shangguan Li, Mr. Mei, and Li Mu. The 2 of them listened to everything the Empress said. These truths that would make the Empress uncomfortable could only be said by Li Mu. Mr. May asked, "What did you say?" Li Mu honestly told him the conversation last night. Mr. May glanced at him and asked, "Do you think that because Her Majesty favors you so much, you can say anything?" Li Mu said, "I'm also thinking for her sake." Mr. May thought for a moment and said, "You're thinking too simply. Her Majesty is the former crown princess and also the former empress. If she really did that, what would the world think? All the court officials and the 4 major academies would stop her." Li Mu originally wanted to tell Mr. May that as long as she had absolute power, she could do anything. It was unlikely that she would have 3 palaces and 6 courtyards, because the mainstream view didn't approve of one woman having many husbands, and it would easily lead to criticism. However, it made sense to only have one empress. As long as the empress's power could suppress all resistance, the Great Zhou would have its first male empress. However, after thinking about it carefully, Li Mu felt a little uncomfortable. After all, who didn't want to be the sole empress's favorite? If he had an empress, the empress might not treat him as well as she did now. It wasn't a possibility, it was a certainty. When Lu Hanyin and Li Qing weren't around, he could stay in Changle Palace all day. When they came back, he could only stay in Changle Palace for 4 hours a day. It was the same principle. Li Mu had to admit that he was also a selfish person. He didn't want to share the empress's favor with others, even if that person was the empress. Therefore, he didn't say anything more. Instead, he looked at Mr. May and said, "Don't worry about Her Majesty. You should worry about yourself. If you don't find one now, it will be too late. Do you want me to introduce you to?" Mr. May looked at Li Mu without any emotion. Li Mu felt his hair stand on end under her gaze. Then he realized something and immediately said, "Don't you dare have any ideas about me. I have a family, and you're almost old enough to be my mother. We're not suitable." In a panic, Li Mu said what was on his mind. Fortunately, Mr. May was magnanimous and didn't get angry. He left after drinking a cup of tea. Wan Wan and Xiao Bai were both in Changle Palace. Li Mu's lunch was also there. In the afternoon, he stayed in Changle Palace to help the Empress deal with the memorials. He didn't return to the Secretariat. He walked out of the Secretariat and saw Mr. May standing not far ahead. She looked at Li Mu with an extremely unfriendly gaze, holding a stick in her hand. Chapter 395. You're saying I'm old. You're old enough to be your mother. Let me hear you call me mother. In Changle Palace, Li Mu was being chased up and down by Mr. May with a stick. He thought that after escaping to Changle Palace, Mr. May would restrain himself in front of the Empress. He didn't expect that the Empress would stand by and even eat melon seeds. Therefore, Changle Palace became even more lively. Mr. May was chasing Li Mu, Wan Wan was chasing behind, and Xiao Bai was chasing her. She couldn't catch up with Li Mu, and Xiao Bai and Wan Wan couldn't catch up with her either. Changle Palace was in chaos, and the Empress stood by and ate melon seeds. Later, Shangwan Li also joined in. Of course, she was helping Mr. May. Mr. May's reaction arc was also very long. He didn't explode in the Secretariat, but now he was extremely angry. Although Li Mu could continue hiding, it was not a good idea to continue hiding like this. Hence, he deliberately went easy on Lord May and let him hit his but twice so that Lord May would calm down and stop. Then, this matter would be considered over. As a friend, Li Mu had already done his duty. In the afternoon, he showed some of his suggestions for the reform of the Department of Offerings to the Empress. The two of them exchanged some ideas, and this matter was finalized. The Department of Offerings wasn't considered an official office of the imperial court, and related matters didn't need to travel 3 provinces. After confirming the details with the Empress, Li Mu walked out of Changle Palace and went to the Department of Offerings. When he passed by Zongjing Temple, he happened to see Zhang Chun walking out. Zhang Chun asked, "Lordly, where are you going?" Li Mu said, "I'm going to the Department of Offerings." Zhang Chun smiled and said, "I'm also going out of the palace. Let's go together." The two of them walked out of the palace and casually chatted for a while. Zhang Chun suddenly said with emotion, "It's all thanks to you. Otherwise, I don't know when I would be able to live in a big house with 4 entrances. It's good to have a big house. It's big and comfortable to live in. Li Mu understood the meaning behind his words. Old Zhang's greatest wish was to own a 5-section house in the fairy's capital. This was also the common dream of many middle-aged men of his age. Owning a 5-section mansion in Chengdu was as difficult as owning a villa in Beijing's Third Ring Road when housing prices were soaring in the future. This was something that most officials in Chengdu would never be able to achieve in their lifetime. Currently, he had already fulfilled 4/5 of his wish. Li Mu could understand Zhang Chun's stubbornness. He thought for a moment and said, "You've changed your residence so many times in the past year. If you change it again so soon, it'll be easy for people to criticize you. Wait for another half a year. I'll apply to His Majesty to change your residence to one of the 5. In the past 6 months, old Zhang had suffered a lot because of Li Mu. Not only did those people treat him as a subordinate, but they also called old Zhang his dog. This made Li Mu feel a little guilty. These words must have been very painful for old Zhang to hear. It was his duty to fight for Zhang Chun to fulfill his dream. Wasn't it just a 5-section house? As long as he whispered something to the Empress, it wouldn't be a problem at all. Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "There's no need for that. I'm already very satisfied with the residence I'm living in now. By the way, what do you think the imperial court will do with the Duke of Nanyang's residence now that he's dead?" Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun in shock. The Duke of Nanyang's residence was 10 entrances. It was one of the largest private residences in the fairy's capital. There were some things that one was born with. If one didn't have them at birth, it was unlikely that they would have them for the rest of their lives. A 10-section residence was one of them. Those who were qualified to live in such residences were members of the royal family with real power. A 5-section residence was almost the limit of what an official could get. Any higher would depend on actual contributions. Expanding the territory, suppressing the demon nation, fixing the ghost region, and destroying the demon sect. If one could do any of these things, it wouldn't be excessive to be conferred the title of Duke, let alone a 10-section residence. However, none of these were things that old Zhang could do. Li Mu looked at him helplessly and sighed, "Old Zhang, it's fine as long as a residence is big enough to live in. That's enough. Why do you want such a big residence? It's too big even for a pig, let alone a family of 3. Zhang Chun also sighed and said, "Who would complain about having too many residences? I don't want you to help me fight for it now. It won't be too late to help me achieve it when you're successful in the future." Li Mu nodded and said, "I'll try my best." After all, he wasn't the Empress, and the Duke of Nanyang's residence wasn't his. Even if Li Mu was successful in the future, it was unlikely that he would help him fight for it, unless he became the Emperor or Empress himself. Li Mu treated this as Zhang Chun's unrealistic fantasy. He threw it to the back of his mind and came to the consecration department. Although the current consecration department didn't have as many people as before, it was more cohesive. There wouldn't be a situation where the consecrators weren't under the jurisdiction of the imperial court like before. In terms of high-end combat strength, there was also an additional peak 6th realm expert. Including the 2 remaining high consecrators, the current strength of the Great Zhou's consecration department was enough to wipe out most of the branch sects of the 10 demon sects. Li Mu came this time to inform everyone about the changes to the consecration department. Among them, the biggest change was their salary. The Great Zhou court was much more generous to the foreign consecrators than its own officials. Not to mention that every consecrator was allocated a residence of at least 2 courtyards. Their salary was also 10 times or even dozens of times that of ordinary officials. The resources that the high consecrators received from the imperial court every year were astronomical figures. From today onwards, the salaries of all consecrators would be lowered. They would be divided into several grades according to their cultivation, and each grade would have a basic salary. In addition to the basic salary, they would receive a commission based on the number of missions they went out on and the degree of completion of the missions. How many resources they would receive in the end would depend on their own abilities. If they were more diligent, the resources they would receive every year would far exceed what they received before. This was to change the previous situation where many consecrators in the consecration department squandered resources. They lived in residences bestowed by the imperial court and only came to the consecration department for a few days a year. They mingled in the various major entertainment venues of the divine capital. The annual salary from the imperial court, as well as the money they earned through their own abilities, could sustain their drunken and extravagant lives. Cultivation was dry and difficult. A portion of cultivators, because they could not bear this kind of loneliness, or because they did not have any hope of breaking through, would choose to indulge in pleasure. Limu could not control their pleasure, but he did not allow them to use the resources of the national treasury for pleasure. The things of the national treasury were the Empress's things. Although not all of the Empress's things belonged to Limu, sooner or later, some of them would belong to him. In this way, these consecrators were basically Limu's own resources. The salary reduction of the consecration department this time was only relative. In reality, their salary was still much higher than that of ordinary officials. The nature of the two jobs was different. The officials sat in the yamen, slacking and chatting, and a day would pass. Many times, the consecrators risked their lives so that they should receive more. Limu looked at the people of the consecration department and said, "The imperial court invests a great deal of resources here every year, and the consecration department does not support idle people. Which consecrator has an objection to what I said earlier?" The crowd was noisy for a moment, then finally quieted down. Not a single person stood out. Although the reform this time had indeed reduced the treatment of the consecrators, as long as they were diligent and did not cheat, they would receive more than before. This was equivalent to distributing the resources of those lazy people to those diligent people. The majority of people agreed with this point from the bottom of their hearts. In the past, when they saw those people, because they had made friends with the old party, dawdled in the consecration department, and were able to receive the same amount of cultivation resources as them, or even more than them, they felt somewhat indignant. From now on, this kind of situation would no longer exist. Limu swept his gaze over the crowd and asked, "Does no one have any objections?" The consecrators thought to themselves, those who had objections to him had already been driven out of the consecration department. Of those who remained here, who would have any objections? Who would dare to have any objections? After a long time, seeing that no one spoke, Limu nodded and said, "Since no one has any objections, then this matter is decided. In the future, if you have any questions, you can communicate with the two great consecrators at any time." In the consecration department, the sloppy Taoist priest was only a mascot and did not care about the specific affairs of the consecration department. The ones in charge of the consecration department were still the two great consecrators from before. One of them was called Chen Xian, and the other was called Chen Mo. They were a pair of twin brothers, and were not from the Great Zhou. They had been invited by the imperial court to become consecrators for many years when they traveled to the Great Zhou. Although these two were not as strong as the sloppy Taoist priest, they were still rare sixth realm experts. For the sake of those two heavenly secret talismans, Limu believed that they would change their usual style. After purging the old party's influence here and reforming the old system, the matter of the consecration department came to an end. What followed would gradually return to the right track, and Limu did not need to worry about it. After leaving the consecration department, he returned to Changle Palace. He had come to take Wan and Xiaobai back. For a foreign subject to bring two little girls to live in the Empress's chambers, it was ultimately improper. This time, Xiaobai did not express anything, but Wan was somewhat reluctant to part with him. The imperial kitchen had gathered all the delicacies of the 36 counties of the Great Zhou, and she had not even tasted 1% or 1,000th of them. To her, leaving here was no different from losing the entire world. In the Changle Palace, Zhou Qiong sat on the dragon throne and looked down at Limu. He said, "Before your wife comes back, you can live in the palace." Limu hesitated. "Your Majesty, this isn't very good, is it?" "What's not good about it?" Zhou, he said indifferently. This place is not far from the Secretariat, and it saves you the time of going to and from the Yamen every day. I will let the Imperial Kitchen arrange 3 meals a day, and it will also save you the time of cooking. With this time saved, how many reports can you handle, and how many things can you do? Li Mu stared at her in a daze. Zhou Yi indeed did not have the surname Bai. She was completely the Zhou Bapi of the great Zhou. Even Zhou Bapi would cry if she heard of her exploitation of Li Mu. At this moment, Zhou Yi continued, Wan and Xiao Bai should also stay here. When I have time, I can also guide them in their cultivation. A few months' time is enough for Xiao Bai to advance to the 5-tailed realm, and Wan will also advance to the 4th realm very soon. At that time, her spirit eyes will be even more powerful. Looking at Wan and Xiao Bai's expectant gazes, Li Mu could not bear to say no in the end. He did not dare to, because although the Empress looked at him calmly, there was also an unquestionable threat in her calmness. Of course, the reason why Li Mu did not refuse was that he also saw the anticipation in the depths of the Empress's eyes. Although the Empress had everything, she had also lost everything. What she had was power and strength. What she had lost was family, friendship, and all the beautiful emotions in the world. No one would have such feelings for the Empress, except for the naive Xiao Bai and Wan. Xiao Bai was naive and innocent because she had not seen much of the world. And to Wan, if she was not given good food, the Empress would be the Empress. If she was allowed to eat as much as she wanted in the Imperial Kitchen, she would be the dearest big sister Zhou. The Empress was too lonely. She needed companionship more than anyone else. The existence of Wan and Xiao Bai brought endless liveliness to this dead Changle Palace. This liveliness was exactly what the Empress needed. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu and asked, Do you have any objections to what I said? Li Mu bowed and said, This subject obeys. Chapter 396. Li Mu really didn't dare to have any objections to what the Empress had said. If he rejected her now, after tonight, he would have to beg the Empress to move into Changle Palace the next morning. She looked quite magnanimous, but in reality, she was more petty than anyone else. If she was slightly dissatisfied, Li Mu would just have to wait to meet her in her dreams at night. Besides, she also promised to help Xiao Bai and Wan evolve. This was also something Li Mu couldn't reject. With Wan and Xiao Bai's current cultivation, there was already very little that Li Mu could help them with. However, following the Empress would undoubtedly bring them great benefits. He didn't dare to say that he could help them reach Realm 6, but it wouldn't be a problem to help them reach Realm 5 or Realm 4. Under Mr. May's lead, Wan and Xiao Bai went to the Imperial Kitchen to clean out. After all, she was a silly girl. She was so unruly. Li Mu felt a little embarrassed. He explained, when she was young, Wan's hometown was in a famine. When her parents brought her to escape, they left her on the road to save food for her younger brother. She almost starved to death. Later, she was lucky enough to survive, but she ended up with the problem of not being able to eat enough. Wan's illness was psychological, not physical. In the past, Li Mu was worried that her body would have problems eating, but now he didn't have to worry. As long as she liked, she could eat as much as she wanted. Zhou Yi said somewhat angrily, Should she be abandoned just because she's a girl? Li Mu couldn't answer her. Many people in Great Zhou still had the goal of continuing the family line as their life goal. The idea of favoring boys over girls was the mainstream in the hearts of the people. Li Mu could say, Not everyone likes sons. I prefer daughters. One of the most romantic things for a man is to have a cute daughter, buy her the most beautiful clothes, make her the most fun toys, and spoil her like a little princess. Zhou Yi looked at him and asked, You want your daughter to become princess? Li Mu was stunned for a moment before he explained, It's just a metaphor. If his daughter was a princess, the Empress would have to give him the position of emperor. Zhou Yi thought about it and said, Since you don't like sons so much, give your first son to me. Li Mu looked at her in a daze, his face full of confusion. Why should I pass the throne to an outsider? The Xiao family is not united with me, and I am no longer a member of the Zhou Yi. Your first son was sent to my side when he was born, and he took my surname. I taught him to cultivate from a young age, and you taught him how to govern the country. I believe that when he grows up, he will definitely be a qualified emperor." Li Mu had thought that the empress had already exploited him enough. He had not thought that she could go even further. Not only did she have designs on him, but she also had plans for his unborn son's life. Li Mu flatly refused. "That won't do. Even if I agree, my wife won't." Zhou Yi said, "That might not be the case." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Even if they agree, I won't." Zhou Yi asked, "I want to raise your son as the future emperor. Why won't you agree?" Li Mu had no reason to agree. He was the future headmaster of the Fulu school. His son could be considered the second generation of an immortal. His status was not lower than that of the great Zhou's crown prince. Moreover, in the history of the great Zhou, none of the emperors had lived long. He knew how tiring it was to review memorials. How could he let his own son suffer like this? He did not answer directly. Instead, he looked at the empress and said, "If your majesty wants a son, why go through so much trouble?" The empress's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked at him and asked, "What did you say?" Li Mu looked back at Shangwan Li, who was standing at the door, and said, "Commander Shangwan is still young. She is also loyal to your majesty. She is not an outsider. If your majesty doesn't want to pass on the Shao and Zhou families, you can let Commander Shangwan bear a son." Shangwan Li, who was eating melons, glared at Li Mu fiercely. She clasped her hands and said, "Your majesty, I don't like men." No wonder Li Mu always looked at her with anger. She didn't like men, so he couldn't force her. Li Mu said, "And Mr. May walked in from outside and asked, 'What's wrong with me?' Li Mu said, 'I'm praising you for being loyal to your majesty. I'm a little hungry. I'll go to the kitchen to find something to eat. You guys talk." After saying this, he quickly walked out of the Changle Palace. Li Mu deeply experienced the empress's laziness again. Her laziness in the past was just to let Li Mu help her approve the memorials. Now she was so lazy that she didn't even want to have a child herself. Unfortunately, Li Mu couldn't do this for her. Besides, he and Lu Hanyin didn't plan to have a child so early. The empress's wishful thinking couldn't be realized so easily. In order to prevent the empress from having any ideas about him, he couldn't let her have a child or help her have a child. In the following days, Li Mu didn't mention this matter again. Living in the imperial palace was far more boring than Li Mu imagined. In order not to be seen by the officials of the Shangya, he had to get up early every day and travel between the Changle Palace and the Secretariat. Occasionally, he would go to the kitchen to cook a bowl of noodles and a cup of soup for the empress. After a long time, Li Mu wasn't the only one who couldn't stand it. Even Wan and Xiao Bai weren't as lively as they were at the beginning. Although the imperial palace was good, and to Wan, it was heaven. However, if she stayed here every day, heaven would become a prison. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu finished approving the memorials and saw the two girls leaning on the table listlessly with one hand supporting their cheeks. He thought for a moment and said, "Why don't we go outside the palace to play tomorrow?" Okay. Wan and Xiao Bai's eyes lit up, and they immediately got up from the table. These days, they had been bored to death. It just so happened that there was no morning court tomorrow, and it was also a rest day. Li Mu turned to look at the empress, who was lying lazily on the chair reading a book, and asked, "Your Majesty, do you want to go together?" Zhou Yi's attention had been on Li Mu since just now. Hearing this, she said unhurriedly, "You arrange it. It was just an ordinary trip, and there was nothing to arrange. As long as they could leave this cage-like imperial palace, even if it was just to find a place to enjoy the scenery, they would be in a much better mood." They left the imperial palace together the next day. Outside the divine capital, Li Mu chose a mountain with a nice view. He used magic to clear an empty space and spread out a clean blanket. Then, he placed some pastries and preserved fruits that he had prepared from the imperial kitchen on top of it. Mr. May and Shangwan Li set up a stove not far away, and they would barbecue meat later. After Wan and Xiao Bai left the imperial palace, they went wild, chasing rabbits and catching pheasants. Li Mu lay on the stall with his hands behind his head. Everywhere he looked, there was only the blue sky. At this moment, the gloominess and depression in his heart were swept away. As expected, a place like the Imperial Palace couldn't be stayed for too long. Looking at the square sky all the time was not good for one's health. He sat on the blanket and looked at the barren hills around her. With a flick of her finger, a crystal light was flicked into the soil. As a result, green buds began to appear on the barren land around them. Soon, grass began to grow, and colorful wildflowers bloomed. The air soon emitted a refreshing fragrance. He lay beside Li Mu and looked up at the sky with him. After a while, she said softly, "It's almost the new year." If she didn't remind him, Li Mu wouldn't have realized that it was really the new year. Li Mu was forced to stay in Changle Palace by the Empress and did the work she was supposed to do day and night. Apart from Changle Palace and the Secretariat, she didn't go out and didn't take a step out. She had already lost track of time. He didn't expect that he couldn't spend the first New Year with Lu Hanyin and Li Qing. Cultivators didn't pay much attention to the New Year. The old men of Mount Baiyun spent most of their time in seclusion. They could be said to have truly transcended the secular world. However, Li Mu couldn't. He hoped that on New Year's Eve, his family could gather together and have a New Year's Eve dinner. The Empress reminded him. "I went to the brothel last time to catch someone, not to do anything else. We've been married for so many years. Don't we trust each other at all?" Madame Zhang said, "I believe you. But where did you go the night I kicked you out?" Zhang Chun said, "I found an inn to sleep in." Madame Zhang asked, "Didn't you go to the Li residence? His wife isn't in Fairy's capital. There's no one at home. Why didn't you stay at his place?" Zhang Chun said, "He's not at home." Madame Zhang said in surprise, "His wife just left, and he's not going home at night. That can't be. Li Mu isn't that kind of person." Zhang Chun waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about that." Madame Zhang said unhappily, "What do you mean, don't worry about that? If he's really that kind of person, you should stay away from him. Don't be led astray by him." Zhang Chun shook his head and said, "Don't interrupt if you don't understand. Enjoy the scenery. It's not easy to get a day off. The scenery here is not bad." At this time, the family of three had reached the peak. Zhang Yi looked up at the empty space in the distance and said, "There's someone there." Zhang Chun looked over and happened to meet the eyes of a woman. Madame Zhang was shocked and said, "Isn't that Li Mu? Who's the woman beside him? They're alone in broad daylight. What are they doing in the wilderness?" I didn't expect him to really be that kind of... Before Madame Zhang could finish her words, Zhang Chun covered her mouth. After that, he held Madame Zhang in one hand and his daughter in the other and flew down the mountain on a cloud. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. Li Mu looked in the direction the Empress was looking and asked, "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" The Empress retracted her gaze and said, "Nothing. A few deer ran past just now." Speaking of deer, Li Mu remembered that he brought half a deer leg from the Imperial kitchen today. He put it in the space of the flask heaven and marinated it with honey. He stood up and said, "Your Majesty, rest for a while. I'll go prepare the barbecue." He walked to a place not far away and took out the deer leg and some barbecue that he had prepared. He put them on the grill and put charcoal under it. Barbecue with charcoal was much better than barbecue with magic power. At the same time, on the main peak of Mount Baiyun, Li Qing looked at Lu Hanyin beside her and said helplessly, "Why don't you tell him?" Lu Hanyin snorted and said, "Who knows what he's been doing after we left the divine capital? This time, we'll sneak back and catch him by surprise. If he's obedient, it'll be a surprise. If he's not obedient, humph." She looked at Li Qing and said, "I know you care about him, but you can't tell him in advance. We have to stand on the same side." The sky was gray, and snowflakes were floating in the air. Although the divine capital wasn't in the south, it rarely snowed in the winter. The snowflakes fell on the ground and quickly melted. "It's snowing." Wan Wan and Xiao Bai ran out of the room barefooted. They stood in the courtyard and opened their arms to embrace the snowflakes. Li Mu slapped their butts and said, "Go back and put on your clothes and shoes before coming out." Wan Wan and Xiao Bai loved snow. They wanted to build a few snowmen to play with. Unfortunately, the snow in the divine capital wasn't heavy. It melted as soon as it touched the ground. Li Mu tried to use his magic. Although the snowflakes in front of the palace were heavier, it was still far from enough. The Empress walked out of the Changle Palace. She looked at Wan and Xiao Bai, who were waving at the sky in anticipation. Her hands formed a few seals, and a white light flew out from her hand and went straight to the clouds. The snowflakes suddenly became heavier and fell down. Soon, a layer of snow accumulated on the ground. Outside the palace, the people of the divine capital also walked out of their houses. They looked at the snowflakes in the sky with satisfaction. It's been a long time since the divine capital snowed so heavily. Next year will be a good year. Ever since Her Majesty ascended the throne, the lives of the people have been getting better and better. In front of the Changle Palace, Xiao Bai and Wan had already built a few snowmen. Although they were called snowmen, they were more like snow sculptures. The snowmen they built didn't have round heads and big bodies. Instead, they were as tall as a person and looked very lifelike. Xiao Bai was carrying a little fox in her arms. Wan was carrying 2 buns on her head. The taller figure beside her was Li Mu. Beside Li Mu was the Empress, who was wearing an imperial robe and an imperial crown. The 4 snowmen stood in front of the palace like pieces of art. Not only did they have the same figure and appearance as the others, but even their auras were similar. Wan looked at her masterpiece with satisfaction. Then, she scratched her head and said, "I think I forgot something." Soon, she remembered. She slapped her head and said, "I forgot about Miss and Sister Qing." Soon, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing's snow sculptures also appeared in the square. Wan nodded in satisfaction and said, "This is what a family should be." Li Mu thought to himself, if Lu Hanyan didn't come back soon, her sweet little jacket would be taken away by the Empress. He walked to Wan and Xiao Bai and asked, "Tonight, are we going home or staying here?" Wan said without hesitation, "Miss and Sister Qing aren't at home. Let's celebrate the new year here with Sister Zhou. There must be a lot of dishes for the New Year's Eve dinner in the palace." Zhou Yi said, "There are more than 100 delicious dishes for the New Year's Eve dinner in the palace." Wan tugged at Li Mu's sleeve and whispered, "Young master." Li Mu rubbed her head and said, "Then let's stay here." On New Year's Eve, the Empress dismissed all the guards on duty. Even Mr. Mei and Shangwan Li were driven home by her. There were only 4 people left in Changle Palace. In addition to the New Year's Eve dinner prepared by the Imperial Kitchen, the 4 of them also made dumplings together. From the skin to the filling of the dumplings, they prepared everything bit by bit. In Changle Palace, the dishes were all served. The 4 of them stood in front of the table and raised their wine glasses at the same time. At the same time, North Court, Li Mansion. On New Year's Eve, Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, who had rushed back to Chengdu, stood in the courtyard with confusion on their faces. Lu Hanyan scanned the entire Li Mansion with her mind. She didn't find Li Mu, Wan or Xiao Bai. She frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "Where are they?" On New Year's Eve, they wanted to give Li Mu a surprise, but they were the ones who were surprised. On New Year's Eve, when families reunited, where did Li Mu, Wan and Xiao Bai go? Lu Hanyan took out a sound-transmitting magic treasure. After activating it, she said in a bad mood, "Where are you?" In Changle Palace, Li Mu heard the voice from the sound-transmitting magic treasure in his hand and said in surprise, "You're at home?" Chapter 397. Zhou put down her wine cup and asked Li Mu calmly, "Is your wife back?" Li Mu nodded and said, "They're at home now." Zhou said calmly, "Then let's go back." As soon as she said this, the scenery before Li Mu, Xiao Bai, and Wan changed. When they appeared again, they were already in the courtyard of the Li residence. Lu Hanyan looked at the 3 people who suddenly appeared and asked, "What's the matter with you guys?" Li Mu said awkwardly, We were in the palace just now." Lu Hanyan frowned and asked, "What were you doing in the palace on New Year's Eve?" Li Mu explained, "Didn't you say that you guys weren't coming back? Only Wan, Xiao Bai, and I were left at home. Only Her Majesty was in the palace. We thought that we could have dinner together tonight and have each other's company." Lu Hanyin looked at Wan Wan and Xiao Bai and asked, "Is that so?" Xiao Bai and Wan Wan nodded repeatedly. Lu Hanyin walked to the stone table in the courtyard and reached out her finger to gently wipe it. Looking at the dust on her hand, she asked Li Mu, "You guys have been eating this meal for at least half a month, right?" Li Mu said, "Let me explain first. If the imperial court was a company and the empress was the boss, Li Mu would be the employee that the boss valued the most. As a boss who cared about her employees, she understood that Li Mu had to travel a long way to and from work. So she let him stay near the company in her own villa. Wasn't this normal? On New Year's Eve, his wife was at home. The boss was touched that he had worked overtime day and night, so it wasn't too much to treat him to a New Year's Eve dinner, right?" Lu Hanyin looked at Li Mu and asked, "So, for the past half a month, the three of you have been living in the palace?" Li Mu nodded. Lu Hanyin didn't make trouble for Li Mu, but Wan Wan was called to her room. Li Mu didn't dare to follow her. He glanced at Li Qing, and Li Qing gave him a helpless look. Obviously, she was now on the same side as Lu Hanyin. Inside the room, Lu Hanyin tapped Wan Wan's forehead and said, "What did I tell you before I left? I told you to keep an eye on him and make sure he doesn't come back at night. But you guys are good, you just don't come back with him." Wan Wan lowered her head and looked at her feet. She sobbed a few times and tears dripped down her face. This made Lu Hanyin at a loss. She said in a panic, "Why are you crying?" "I haven't said anything yet." Wan Wan wiped her tears and said in a muffled voice, "There were so many dishes. I haven't eaten a single bite yet." Lu Hanyin didn't hear what she said clearly. Seeing that she was crying sadly, she could only hug her and comfort her. Okay, I don't blame you. Don't cry." Fortunately, Li Mu didn't sleep in the palace alone. He had Wan Wan and Xiao Bai to accompany him. He didn't do anything to let her down. At most, there was a little more dust in the house, but to clean it up was just a small spell. Now, Li Mu was facing a very serious problem. He made the decision to have New Year's Eve dinner at Changle Palace after learning that Lu Hanyin and Li Qing wouldn't come back tonight. So he didn't buy vegetables in advance. After all, if they were in the palace, he wouldn't have to worry about these things at all. So what were they eating now? It was New Year's Eve. Every family was eating reunion dinner in the middle of the night. Even if they went out to buy vegetables, it would be too late. It was a pity that they hadn't even touched a single bite of the sumptuous meal on the table in Changle Palace. Little White was slightly better off, but Wan Wan was on the verge of tears. When the Empress had moved her home, her chopsticks were still in her hand. There was only one way to have a normal New Year's Eve. Changle Palace. Zhou sat on the roof of Changle Palace. She didn't touch the New Year's Eve dinner that the imperial kitchen had prepared with great care. The snow had stopped, but after Li Mu and the others left Changle Palace, it started to fall again. Moreover, it seemed to be falling more and more heavily. Zhou allowed the snow to fall on her body. She silently looked at the lights of Shundu on New Year's Eve. It was the busiest night in Shundu, but Changle Palace was as cold and cheerless as usual. This was the liveliness of the common people. It had nothing to do with her. At a certain moment, she felt the spirit snail in the flask space vibrate. Zhou stretched out her hand. The spirit snail floated in her palm. She looked at it for a while and put it away, ignoring it. A moment later, she took it out again and asked, "Why are you looking for me again?" Wan Wan's aggrieved voice came from the spirit snail. "Sister Zhou, there's so much food. Can you finish it all by yourself?" Although Lu Hanyin often complained that the Empress was too harsh on Li Mu, when she really saw the Empress, she kept her head down. She didn't even dare to look at her. She didn't have the arrogance she had in front of Li Mu. In the hearts of the women of the great Zhou, the Empress was like a god. It wasn't just the women of the great Zhou. In the countries of Zhu province, no matter if they were human, ghost, or demon, as long as they were female, they all admired the Empress. She was less than 30 years old, but she was sitting in the most powerful empire in Zhu province. Her strength had also reached the upper three realms that cultivators dreamed of. She was the first person in history. This number one person included a man. People who weren't familiar with her were easily intimidated by her noble and powerful aura. Lu Hanyin was one of them. In Changle Palace, she even spoke much less than usual. Fortunately, with Wanwan and Xiao Bai, especially Wanwan, the atmosphere of this special New Year's Eve dinner didn't seem so awkward. The people of the Great Zhou had the custom of enduring the New Year. Tonight, they generally didn't sleep. They had to tidy up when they got home, so Li Mu and the others simply stayed in Changle Palace. In order to make it easier to get through the long night, Li Mu used more than 100 pieces of spirit jade to carve a set of mahjong tiles. Of course, no one present was an ordinary person. For the sake of fairness, no one, including the Empress, was allowed to use magic to cheat. Except for the silly girl Wanwan, which one of the women in Changle Palace tonight wasn't intelligent and quickly learned how to play. Thus, Changle Palace was filled with the sound of playing mahjong for the entire night. Li Mu, Lu Hanyin, Li Qing, and the Empress sat at a square table. Xiaobai moved a chair and sat behind Li Mu. Wanwan ran over to take a look and quickly ran back to the table to eat a few mouthfuls. The night passed quickly. On the morning of the first day of the new year, after eating dumplings, Lu Hanyin and Li Qing were about to return. This time, their return to Shundu was a last-minute decision. Yu Zhenzi was still waiting for Lu Hanyin at Mount Baiyun. Li Qing also had to go back to continue her seclusion and strive to break through to the fifth realm as soon as possible. Li Mu asked the Dao Bell to escort them back. When they reached Mount Baiyun, it flew back by itself. On the morning of the first day of the new year, Li Mu and the Empress didn't idle around. Every year on the first day of the new year, there was a court assembly as usual. In addition to the officials of Shundu, the governors of the 36 counties also had to enter the palace on this day to report on their work. In addition, the Ministry of Rites also had to take the lead to hold the first ceremony of the new year. When all the procedures were completed, it was almost night. Next was a long holiday. From the first day of the first month to the 15th day of the new year, except for important government offices like the Ministry of Justice that needed officials to be on duty, most officials could enjoy half a month of holiday. Li Mu originally planned to take advantage of this holiday to return to Mount Baiyun. However, Li Qing was in seclusion, and Lu Hanyin was about to travel with Yu Zhenzi. After he returned to Mount Baiyun, there was a high possibility that he would be treated as a heartless talisman drawing machine by those old guys. After careful consideration, Li Mu dispelled this idea. Instead of being squeezed dry by those old guys, he would rather stay in Shundu and be squeezed dry by the Empress. However, the Empress hadn't squeezed him dry recently. The government offices weren't open, and there were no reports to read. Li Mu's daily life was nothing more than playing mahjong, cultivating, and repairing the Dao Bell. The cracks on the Dao Bell were almost invisible to the naked eye, but if the bell grew larger, the cracks would still be very obvious. At present, Li Mu could use it as an offensive Dharma artifact, and it could also protect Li Mu. If he wanted to restore it to its original state and have the power to protect a mountain gate, he would have to wait for it to be completely repaired. However, Li Mu didn't have any new Dharma arts in his mind. Without Dharma arts that hadn't appeared in this world, he wouldn't be able to obtain the origin energy of heaven and earth. Li Mu didn't know of any other methods to obtain the origin energy of heaven and earth. He could only put this matter aside for the time being and leave the Dao Bell by his side for the time being. Even if he didn't have any new Dharma arts, the Dao Bell would be able to repair itself within 10 years. Li Mu walked out of Changle Palace, patted the Dao Bell on his shoulder, and said, "You can only stay by my side for a while longer." The Dao Bell buzzed in response. Li Mu suddenly looked ahead and saw a figure slowly walking toward Changle Palace. Judging from the figure, it seemed to be a woman. She was wearing a black cloak and a black bamboo hat, and her aura was obscure as she walked slowly to the entrance of Changle Palace. She looked at Li Mu, who was standing at the entrance of Changle Palace, and asked, "What's your name?" Li Mu sized her up and said, "Li Mu." The woman in black nodded slightly, and then asked, "Little Li, is Her Majesty in Changle Palace?" Chapter 398. Changle Palace. Li Mu already knew the identity of the woman in black. She was the commander of the Chrysanthemum Guards, the Orchid, Bamboo, and Chrysanthemum Guards. Li Mu had never seen her before. According to the title of Commander of the Internal Guards, Li Mu should call her Lady Chrysanthemum. The Chrysanthemum Guards were the Empress's external intelligence organization. They were responsible for monitoring the movements of the Ghost Realm, the Demon Nation, the Demon Sect, and other powerful enemies of the Great Zhou. It was said that many of the Chrysanthemum Guards had infiltrated these forces and were important spies for the imperial court. Zhou Yi looked at the woman in black and asked, "You suddenly returned to Shundu. Did the Demon Sect make a big move?" The woman in black glanced at Li Mu and said to Zhou Yi, "Your Majesty, this is a matter of great importance. If it is not handled well, it will be a catastrophe for the Great Zhou and even the entire righteous path." Zhou Yi understood her meaning and said, "He is one of us. If you can tell me something, you can also tell him." The woman in black didn't expect the Empress to trust a man so much, but she didn't dare to question the Empress. She looked away from Li Mu and said, "Your Majesty, the Demon Sect found the Demon Emperor White Emperor's cave." The Empress, who had always been indifferent, showed a serious expression when she heard this news. She asked, "Is the news true?" The woman in black nodded and said, "One of my spies risked exposing his identity to spread this news. The Demon Sect has been searching for the White Emperor's cave for hundreds of years. Recently, they made a major breakthrough and confirmed the approximate location of the White Emperor's cave." "What Demon Emperor, White Emperor?" Li Mu was confused and couldn't help but ask, "Your Majesty, who is Demon Emperor, White Emperor? What happened to his cave?" The woman in black looked at Li Mu and frowned. "Which commander do you work for? How can you be so unruly? Is this a place where you can interrupt?" Li Mu pursed his lips. If it wasn't for the Empress's serious expression, he wouldn't have interrupted even if she asked him to. He said to the Empress, "Your Majesty, Lady Chrysanthemum and you have important matters to discuss. I will leave first." Zhou Yi said, "Come back." "Li Mu, this is not the place for this subject to interrupt. This subject should leave first. Stop fooling around." Zhou Yi rubbed her eyebrows helplessly. She looked at the woman in black and said, "When you see him in the future, treat him like you see me. Don't say those words again." The woman in black stared blankly at Li Mu. The shock in her heart could not be any greater. Had His Majesty's trust in this person reached such a level? After regaining her senses, she lowered her head and said in a deep voice, "Yes." Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu again and explained, "Demon Emperor Bai Di was a powerful demon 3,000 years ago. His cultivation had reached the 9th realm. Today, most of the major demon clans' orthodoxies were passed down from him. Thus, he was respectfully called Demon Emperor by the demon clans. Although the Demon Emperor passed down the demon orthodoxies, he had no direct disciples. His lifespan ended, and after he died, no one inherited his cave abode. By Demon Emperor, powerful demon." Li Mu still could not imagine how powerful he was with such words. It was only when the Empress mentioned the 9th realm that Li Mu realized that this demon was actually so powerful. In Li Mu's eyes, the 7th realm was already very powerful. The Empress could teleport, plant flowers, and even chase him into his dreams to beat him up. These were only the abilities of the 7th realm. How powerful would the legendary 9th realm be? But when he thought about how even someone as powerful as the 9th realm only had a lifespan of 300 years, Li Mu felt that it was not that interesting anymore. Powerful cultivators who could reverse yin and yang and mediate destiny would be embarrassed to tell others that they were immortal cultivators if they did not live for thousands of years. They had painstakingly cultivated to the 9th realm, but they had only lived less than 200 years longer than normal people. Moreover, the 300 years of their lives had been spent in boring cultivation. What was the point of cultivating here and there? The Empress continued, "It is said that in the Demon Emperor Bai Di's cave abode, there are many magic treasures and spirit herbs," Li Mu said in surprise. "No matter how good the quality of those magic treasures and spirit herbs are, after 3,000 years, they will lose all their spiritual chi and become ordinary objects, right? The Empress nodded and said, the magic treasures will be damaged, and the spirit herbs will lose their effectiveness. But even after 3,000 years, the Tao page will not change at all. Li Mu was shocked and said, there is a Tao page in the Demon Emperor by Dee's cave abode. The Empress said, this was not a secret at the time. It was because he comprehended part of the Tao page that he was able to pass down the teachings of the demon race. Later people guessed that the Tao page he had recorded the cultivation methods of the demon race in the current cultivation world. If there was any treasure that was the most precious, it would undoubtedly be the Tao page. Obtaining a Tao page would allow one to establish a sect and pass down their teachings. The 6 sects of Taoism and the various sects of the demon path all inherited their teachings from the Tao page. Over the past 10,000 years, even though the factions have been improving and innovating on the basis of the Tao pages and had made great progress, they had to admit that the cultivation world had only developed for a short period of time. It was still a long way from reaching the peak of the previous era. The scene Li Mu saw from the Fulu School's Tao page had already proved this point. The cultivation of this era was temporarily behind the previous era. The Tao page was at least an item from the previous era. In other words, obtaining the Tao page would allow one to obtain an even more powerful inheritance. He finally understood why Lady Ju and the Empress were so nervous. If this Tao page was obtained by the righteous path, it would be fine. But if it was obtained by the demon path's demon sect, it would be disastrous. The demon path's demon sect was different from ordinary demons. Among the demons, there were good and kind demons like Xiao Bai Yin Xin, and Bai Ting Xin. But there were also evil demons that fed on the essence and blood of humans. The demon path's demon sect was established by these fallen demons. If the demon path's demon sect obtained this Tao page and comprehended an even more powerful demon art from it, it would be a huge blow to the Great Zhou and the righteous path. The demon race originally had an innate advantage. If they obtained a more complete and higher level cultivation method, they might be able to create a force that was not weaker than the 6 sects of Taoism within a few years. The black-clothed woman said solemnly, Your Majesty, we must prevent the demon sect from obtaining the Tao page. Otherwise, it will lead to a disaster. Zhou nodded and said, I understand. This Tao page must not fall into the hands of the demon path. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, Your Majesty, why don't we let the 3 consecrators of the consecration department go? With their strength, it won't be a problem for them to sweep through the demon path's demon sect and obtain the Tao page. Zhou, he shook his head and said, they won't be able to enter Demon Emperor White Emperor's cave abode. Li Mu was puzzled. Why? Zhou, he explained, the reason why his cave abode has not been discovered for so many years is because this cave abode is a flask space that he created himself. An ownerless flask space is unstable. If cultivators above the 6th realm enter, the cave abode will immediately collapse. All living beings in the cave abode will be wiped out by the power of space. Li Mu was stunned. In other words, cultivators above the 6th realm could not enter White Emperor's cave abode at all. Without 6th realm cultivators, what was there to be afraid of? Li Mu looked at the Empress confidently and said, Don't worry, Your Majesty. I will definitely bring that Tao page back. A white light flashed in his palm, and a wooden box appeared. Xian Jizi inserted his magic power and asked briefly, Junior brother, what's the matter? In Changle Palace, Li Mu contacted Xian Jizi several times, but there was no response. Just as he was about to give up, Xian Jizi's voice finally came from the wooden box. Li Mu cleared his throat and said, There is a very important matter. This matter concerns the foundation of Fulu School. The Imperial Court has received accurate news that the Demon Pass Monster Sect has discovered Monster Emperor White Emperor's cave abode. There's a Tao page in the cave abode. I have to get it and not let the Demon Path get it. Senior brother, remember to send a few peak manifestation realm elders over. Remember not to tell anyone about this, Monster Emperor, White Emperor. Li behind the cave abode. The Tao page. In the Tao palace, the phantoms of the other 5 headmasters were stunned. Xianjizi was extremely regretful. The matter of the Tao page was extremely important. He should have waited for these people's phantoms to dissipate before contacting Li Mu. In Chang'e Palace, Li Mu saw that Xianjizi did not speak and frowned. Senior brother, this is a great opportunity to realize your dream of revitalizing Fu Lu School. Can you punch the South Sect, kick the North Sect, lead Xuanzong, make the Pill Cauldron and Spirit Array sects submit to you, and become the head of the 6 Taoist sects? It all depends on this. Senior brother, say something. There was suddenly no sound from the voice transmission box. Li Mu turned it over and looked at it. He was puzzled. Strange, why is there no sound? Is there no signal here? In the Tao Palace of the main peak of Baiyin Mountain, Xianjizi looked at the unfriendly gazes of the 5 people, and an awkward expression appeared on his face. Fellow Taoist Xianjizi, you really are a good headmaster of Fu Lu School. Fellow Taoist, you have big dreams. Oomph. The other 5 headmasters looked at Xianjizi and mocked him. Xianjizi looked at them and suddenly waved his sleeves. A spiritual energy storm swept out, and the 5 primordial spirit phantoms were instantly blown away. Then, Xianjizi stood up and said in a low voice, all 5th realm elders of the various peaks, come to the Tao Palace of the main peak to see me. His voice soon echoed throughout the entire White Cloud Mountain. Chapter 399. The Sect Master urgently summoned all the 5th Realm Elders. This was the first time such a thing had happened on Baiyin Mountain. For a moment, all the Creation Realm Elders in the sect, whether they were writing talismans or cultivating in seclusion, immediately stopped what they were doing and left the various peaks to head to the main peak. At the same time, above the East Sea, in the Xuanzong Ancestral Court, there were dozens of streams of light flying towards the highest peak from several mountains that were hanging upside down in the air. In a certain country in the southwest of the ancestral state, in the ancestral court of the Pill Cauldron sect, all the Creation Realm Elders in the sect had just been urgently summoned by the Sect Master. The South Sect, North Sect, and Spirit Array sect also did the same. For these 5 sects, Xianjizi's dream was not worth mentioning. Which of the 6 Taoist sects did not want a unified Taoism? Everyone was polite on the surface, but in reality, everyone wanted to ride on the heads of others. In comparison, the Tao page that the Demon Emperor by D once possessed was the most important thing. Although what was recorded on that page might only be the cultivation methods of the Demon Clan, all methods were one, and the Great Path was the same. Human cultivators might be able to comprehend something from it. Taking a step back, even if the Tao page was useless to human cultivators, it was a supreme treasure to the demon race. It could even be said that whoever obtained the Tao page would obtain the demon race. Even if they could not obtain it, they could not let the demon path obtain it. Chang'e Palace. Li Mu and Xianjizi were speechless for a long time after their second conversation. He originally wanted Xianjizi to keep it a secret. Now, all the 6 Taoist sects knew that the Demon Path and the Demon Path had found clues to the White Emperor Cave abode. These sects would definitely not stand by and watch. The competition suddenly increased by many times. Xianjizi was old and the sect master. Li Mu had to give him some face and did not say anything. Although it was best for their own people to obtain the Tao page, it was more important that it did not fall into the hands of the Demon Path. If the 6 Taoist sects sent people to participate, the chances of snatching the Tao page from the Demon Path would be higher. There was no time to lose. In order to prevent the Demon Path from taking the initiative, Li Mu had to act immediately. Unfortunately, it was the Lantern Festival in 2 days. He had promised to accompany Xiao Bai and Wan to the Lantern Festival, but now he had to break his promise. After making this decision as quickly as possible, Li Mu left the palace gates and strode toward the Department of Offerings. Life Continent, Country of Demons. In the 100,000 mountain range, the demons had their own territories. Every great demon had their own territory. The people who know about this are all our trusted men. I guarantee that it will be airtight. As long as we find the entrance to the cave residence, we will be able to quietly get that thing. At that time, Grand Elder will unify the demon nation and become the king of demons. It will only be a matter of time. The strong man nodded and said, "It's fine as long as it's airtight." Just as he finished speaking, someone suddenly walked in quickly and said, "Grand Elder, His Highness King Qingguang, is here to visit." The strong man frowned and asked suspiciously, "What is he here for?" This was a sensitive time when he was about to succeed. Any movement would make him suspicious. He would suspect that the other party was here for his White Emperor's cave residence. Soon the strong man shook his head. He must be thinking too much. King Qingguang was far away in the ghost realm. How would he know his secret? He looked at the person and said, "Let him in." Ever since the Nether Saint died at the hands of the Empress of the Great Zhou, the Soul Sect had no leader. In order to stabilize the Soul Sect, several elders of the Sage Sect worked together to raise King Qingguang's strength to the 6th realm and promoted him to the new Grand Elder of the Soul Sect. In terms of status, this former junior of the Soul Sect was now on equal footing with him. Soon, the black-robed King Qingguang walked into the cave residence. He first cupped his hands to the strong man and said, "Greetings, Demon King." Although he was now the Grand Elder of the Soul Sect, the strength of the demon race and the Soul Sect could not be mentioned in the same breath. He was far from being a match for the Grand Elder of the Demon Sect. In front of him, King Qingguang still lowered his status slightly. The Demon Sect's Grand Elder Taoist priest said, "I haven't congratulated you on being promoted to the Grand Elder of the Soul Sect." King Qingguang said modestly, "It's all luck. I can't compare to the Demon King." The two exchanged a few polite words. The Demon Sect's Grand Elder asked, "Why did you come to my demon nation instead of staying in the ghost realm?" King Qingguang said, "I heard that the Demon King discovered the White Emperor's cave residence, so I came to take a look." Boom! The Demon Sect's Grand Elder's mind buzzed. He had already ordered everyone to keep this matter a secret. The entire matter was airtight. How did King Qingguang, who was far away in the ghost realm, know about it? Soon, his face regained its calm. He looked at King Qingguang and said in surprise, "Even I didn't know about this. How did you know about it?" King Qingguang looked at him with surprise and said slowly, "Ahead of the Pill Cauldron School, and a dozen Fortune Realm elders have already entered the Demon Nation." Chapter 400. Inside the cave, King Qingguang looked at the Demon Sect Grand Elder and said, "Demon King, this time the 6 Taoist sects and the Great Zhou Court have all sent experts to the Demon Nation. We must determine the purpose of these people. If they really want to eradicate the Demon Sect and pacify the Demon Nation, we must immediately report back to the Sage Sect and ask the elders to decide." The Demon Sect Grand Elder snorted and asked, "Do they have the guts?" Whether it was the righteous Tao, the demon Tao, or the Great Zhou Court, there is a certain tacit understanding between the three. The Great Zhou Court would never join forces with the 6 Taoist sects to attack a branch of the demon Tao unless they were prepared for the crazy revenge of the 10 demon Tao sects. At that time, the entire ancestral province would become a battlefield. The battle between super experts could render the 36 counties of the Great Zhou barren. If the Great Zhou Court lost, their nation would be destroyed. If the Great Zhou Court won, the 36 counties would become a land of death. The demon Tao might lose, but the righteous Tao and the Great Zhou Court would never win. They were not here to attack the demon sect. Without a doubt, their purpose in coming to the demon nation was the White Emperor's cave. King Qingguang looked at him and said, "So, the matter of the White Emperor's cave is true?" At this point, there was no use in hiding it. The Demon Sect Grand Elder said with a sullen face, "It's true." As his voice fell, another small demon ran in and said, "Grand Elder, the Sage Sect Elder sent a message." The news of the Demon Sect discovering the Demon Emperor White Emperor's cave quickly spread throughout the various demon nations. The Demon Sect discovered the location of the White Emperor's cave. They sent people into the White Emperor's cave. The demon sect Grand Elder obtained that page of the Heavenly Book. The demon sect Grand Elder comprehended the Heavenly Book and is about to unify the demon nation. At first, the demons thought that the news was fake. However, as the rumors became more and more true, some powerful demons could not sit still. Black Wind Nation. A burly man with a face full of black hair and a pair of large ears had a glint in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said, "No, we can't let the demon sect obtain this page of the Heavenly Book. Otherwise, they will cause chaos in our demon kingdom. Send someone to find out what's going on." In a certain mountain range in the demon nation, there was a mountain peak that resembled a wolf's head. At the mouth of the wolf, there was a deep cave. It was pitch black inside the cave, with only a few balls of flame flickering. Only when he got closer did he realize that these were not ghostly flames at all, but pairs of ghostly green eyes. A gray wolf ran into the cave from the outside. Soon, a conversation could be heard from inside the cave. The demon race's heavenly tones cannot fall into the hands of outsiders. Third Brother is right. No matter if it's the humans or the demon sect, we cannot let them obtain the Demon Emperor's Heavenly Book. With our strength, I'm afraid we're no match for the Taoist sect, the Diabolical sect, and the Greyjoy court. Let's discuss this with that snake and that big cat. This time, we have to work together. In the demon nation above the lush mountain range, several figures flew past at high speed. Other than the two high reverends of the worship department and the sloppy Taoist priest, there were 5 reverends at the peak of the manifestation realm beside Li Mu. For the sake of this plan, all the elites of the worship department had been mobilized. Among them, the 5 reverends at the peak of the 5th realm had entered the White Emperor's cave abode with Li Mu. The sloppy Taoist priest and the 2 high reverends were there to protect their safety. The demon nation was not the Great Zhou. There were countless great demons in it, and it was also the lair of the diabolical sect and the demon sect. Danger lurked in every corner. Whether or not they could obtain the treasure was one matter, and whether or not they could leave this place safely after obtaining the treasure was another matter. Within the demon nation, there were many towering mountains and steep ridges and very few plains. As he flew over, Li Mu could feel the soaring demon chi from many of the mountain peaks. Among them, there were many 4th and 5th realm demons. There were even 1 or 2 6th realm demons. In the Great Zhou, 5th realm demons could be called demon kings, and 6th realm demons could be called demon emperors. But here, only 6th realm great demons could be called demon kings. As for demon emperors, it was an honorific that belonged to only one person. Demon Emperor Bai Di was a powerful demon from 3,000 years ago. Before Bai Di, most demons did not know how to cultivate. They relied on their instincts to breathe in spirit chi. Although it was not difficult for such a primitive cultivation method to give birth to spiritual intelligence, it was extremely difficult for powerful cultivators to appear. Bai Di was the first 9th realm great demon. Not only was his own cultivation extraordinary, but he also passed down cultivation methods to many demons. After Bai Di, the demons obtained cultivation methods and began to rise rapidly. They even established the demon nation and ruled separately from the human race until now. It was said that Bai Di only passed down the basic cultivation methods of the demons. The true great supernatural power of the demons still existed in the Heavenly Book in Bai Di's hands. As long as one could obtain the Heavenly Book, they would be able to grasp the supreme cultivation secrets of the demons. The Tao scripture of the Taoist sect was called the Heavenly Book by the demons. Others might have other names, but in the eyes of the Taoist sect, no matter if it was the Demon Tao, the Ghost Tao, the Demon Tao, or the Buddhist Tao, they were all Taos. There was nothing wrong with calling it the Tao scripture. Li Mu and the others swaggered across the sky, encountering quite a number of demons blocking their way. However, when they saw the formation of the group, they fled far away without even thinking about it. Later, Li Mu simply asked the 2 high priests to release their auras. Since then, no more demons dared to jump out. Although they were few in number, only 9, these 9 people could destroy most of the demon nations here. Li Mu took out a compass and looked at the needle on the compass. It pointed to a mountain peak on the left and said there. The group flew another 50 miles to the left and landed on a mountain peak. On the open space on the mountain peak, Hyun Jinko walked over with a smile and said, "Junior brother, you're finally here." The few figures behind him also walked forward and bowed. "Greetings, Marshal Uncle Ling Jeezy." Mount Baiyun was closer to the demon nation, so the people from Fulu School had arrived earlier than Li Mu. However, they did not know the exact location and could only wait for Li Mu to arrive first. No need for formalities. Li Mu waved at the elders and looked to the side, saying, "Taoist Miao Dun is also here." Hyun Jinko revealed a helpless expression. Although the other 5 sects knew about the White Emperor's cave abode, only Li Mu knew its exact location. Even if they arrived at the demon nation, they could only look around like headless flies. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect to meet people from the profound sect here. After Xuanzong's Miao Dun saw them, she insisted on traveling with them. He could not shake her off no matter how hard he tried. In the end, he could only give up. A middle-aged Taoist, nun holding a horsetail whisk, walked over and smiled at Li Mu, saying, "Long time no see. Fellow Taoist, you're not the same as before." When she first met Li Mu, he was still a lowly constable in Yangqiu County with a weak cultivation. After more than a year, he had already advanced to the fortune realm and became a second-generation disciple of Fulu School. His status was the same as hers. Li Mu smiled and said, "Taoist Miao Dun is still as elegant as ever." The middle-aged Taoist nun smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, you're also looking for the White Emperor's cave abode, right? Why don't we go together?" There was only one Tao page. One more person meant one more competitor. However, Taoist Miao Dun had done a lot to kill Qin Huan. Now that she had taken the initiative to ask, Li Mu could not refuse. He nodded and said, "That's good." Taoist Miao Dun glanced at Hyun Jinko and said, "Your junior brother is much stronger than you." Hyun Jinko shook his head and said, "Since junior brother says so, let's go." After all, Li Mu was still the main person in charge of this matter. Xuanzong and Fulu School, although one was in the east and the other in the north, they were both in the Great Zhou. Their relationship was closer than the other sects, so he could not keep refusing. Li Mu was convinced by Zhu Wei's ability to gather information. Apart from bringing news of the White Emperor's cave abode, she also gave Li Mu the specific location. After meeting up with Hyun Jinko and the others, the group of nearly 20 people quickly flew towards the heart of the Yao Kingdom. 2 hours later, the group arrived in the sky above a valley. The slovenly Taoist priest suddenly said, "Stop." The next moment, he rolled up his sleeves and said, "Retreat." Almost instantly, the 2 high priests, Hyun Jinko and Miao Dun, reacted. They each took a few people and retreated out of the valley. Several powerful attacks came from all directions of the valley. The space where Li Mu and the others were just now fluctuated violently. Just the aftermath alone was enough to flatten the surrounding mountains. If Li Mu and the others were still in their original positions, the high priests and the 5th realm elders of Fulu School and Xuanzong would probably be instantly destroyed. The Dongxian experts would also be seriously injured. The next moment, four powerful auras rose from the valley. One of them was emitting a ghostly aura. He was slightly weaker than the Nether Saint, but he was still a 6th realm expert. The other person was a muscular man. His demonic aura soared into the sky. His aura was also very terrifying. Li Mu sensed that he seemed to be even stronger than Hyun Jinko. As for the other 2, one was an unusually handsome man. The other was shrouded in a cloud of fog. His face cannot be seen, but from their auras, these 2 were undoubtedly 6th realm experts. Hyun Jinko looked at the muscular man with a serious expression. He said, "Demon Sect Grand Elder." The man looked at the group with a fierce gaze. His voice was loud as a bell. He said sternly, "This is not a place where you can come. Go back to where you came from." The slovenly Taoist priest crossed his arms and said disdainfully, "Little cat, what are you being so arrogant for? There are only 4 of you and 5 of us. Why don't we fight? Whoever loses can get lost. The 4 sixth realms on the other side were undoubtedly from the Devil's sect. Judging from their characteristics, they should be from the Soul sect, the Demon sect, the Mirage sect, and the Mezong sect, respectively. It was obvious that the Devil's sect had attached great importance to the Demon Emperor's cave residence this time. While the two sides were in a stalemate, Li Mu suddenly felt a gaze from the opposite side fall on him. He looked across and saw a few figures standing behind the handsome man. One of them was a woman who was glaring at him with a ferocious look in her eyes. If the demon race and the demon sect joined forces, the number of 6th realm cultivators on the other side would immediately double. 8 against 5, they were at a disadvantage. Li Mu decisively looked at Hyun Jinko and asked, "Senior brother, can you contact the other 4 sects?" Hyun Jinko immediately understood what Li Mu meant. He took out a bronze mirror and said telepathically, "Jade Sun, 2 heaven-grade pills, and I'll tell you the location of the White the Arch Cave abode." The other party did not hesitate for long and immediately said, "Deal." Hyun Jinko changed his hand seals and sent them into the bronze mirror. He said again, "Guanji Wanzi, 2 heaven-grade array flags, and I'll tell you the location of the White the Arch Cave abode." The person in the mirror said in a low voice, "Deal." Hyun Jinko held the mirror in one hand and changed hand seals with the other. White light was sent into the mirror repeatedly. "Ling Wuzi, 100 bottles of spirit fluid, and I'll tell you where the White the Arch Cave abode is. 50 bottles, no less. If you don't agree, I'll look for Dong Yunzi. It's good that you agree. 50 bottles of spirit fluid in exchange for a chance to obtain the Dao page. You guys don't lose out. Dong Yunzi, 2 heaven-grade magic treasures in exchange for the location of the White the Arch Cave abode." Dan Xingzi and the rest have all agreed. You're the only one left. What? One? Come over quickly. Li Mu looked at Hyun Jinko in a daze. In his eyes, Hyun Jinko had always been an honest person with thick eyebrows and big eyes. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan had become disciples. He was the one who had been exploited the most by Yujin and Fu Daozi. He had been extorted of a lot of treasures, but he did not complain at all. He was so honest that it was embarrassing. He was completely not as shrewd as he was just now. Li Mu was dumbfounded when he heard the news and did 4 business deals. Sensing Li Mu's gaze, Hyun Jinko said embarrassedly, "It's almost time for Senior Brother Sect Master's disciple recruitment ceremony." "I understand." Li Mu nodded embarrassedly and said, I understand. First, it was Lu Hanyan. Then it was Li Mu. The couple had already emptied Hyun Jinko. Until now, Li Mu was too embarrassed to take out the Qing Xian sword in front of him. Now, it was Li Qing's turn. He probably really did not have anything that he could take out. That was why he wanted to take this opportunity to extort a wave of money. By extorting 4 sects at the same time, other than giving Li Qing a meeting gift, he also made a lot of profit. Li Mu was truly somewhat guilty. Their family had forced an honest person to become a treacherous person. Opposite them, the eyes of the 4 demon kings flickered. Although the demon sect did not have good intentions, they definitely did not want the treasures of the demon race to be obtained by humans. At this time, Li Mu looked at the vast expanse of whiteness around him and raised his vigilance to the highest level. The White Emperor's cave mansion was not like what he had imagined. In front of him, there was only a white fog. He could only see 3 or 4 steps away from him. Beyond 5 steps, there was only a thick white fog, and he could not see anything. When Li Mu's spiritual awareness left his body, the range it could explore was no more than 10 steps. Suddenly, he felt a sense of danger. His body moved a few feet to the side, and a flying sword brushed past his neck. Li Mu squinted his eyes and looked at the thick fog in front of him. A figure walked out from there. He glanced at Huan Ji and asked indifferently, "What? Do you want to fight?" The flying sword flew back and floated above Huan Ji's head. She looked at Li Mu with a face full of anger. Just as she was about to activate the flying sword to attack again, the people beside her advised, "Lord Huan Ji, finding the heavenly book is more important." Huan Ji took a deep breath and glared fiercely at Li Mu again. Then, she turned and disappeared into the thick fog. The Fox clan clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred. They would not refuse to repay kindness, nor would they not take revenge. It was not easy for her to persuade her father to leave the demon country and complete the mission alone. At that time, she was heroic and heroic. She vowed to prove her ability to her father. Then, she met Li Mu. Li Mu gave her the first setback in her demon life, and it was during her first mission. This kind of blow made her depressed for a few months, and she couldn't recover from it. Towards this human who ended her first mission and humiliated her. If she did not return the humiliation 100 times over, she would live in humiliation for the rest of her life. However, for now, finding the heavenly book was more important. 3 days later, the experts outside would open this space again. As long as she found the heavenly book, she would have enough time to take revenge. Huan Ji had just provoked him to fight, but she left irresponsibly. The situation in the thick fog ahead was unknown, so Li Mu could not chase after her. The demon path people who came in first, the demon king's subordinates, were nowhere to be found. Beside Li Mu, the leading elders of the other 5 sects cupped their hands and said, "Marshal Uncle Ling Jizi, we will also go elsewhere to search." Although the 6th sect were close, they each represented their own interests. After entering the Demon Emperor's cave, they scattered and searched on their own. Li Mu finally looked at the 5 people from the Fulu school and asked, "What about you?" The leading Taoist priest said, "Before we came, the sect master said that we will listen to Marshal Uncle Ling Jizi's command in this operation." Li Mu nodded and said, "That's good. The situation here is unknown." Chapter 403. Crunch. The handsome man had lost a leg. The sound of bones being chewed came from the ground. This made everyone, including Huan Ji, feel their hair stand on end. The Meizong and Mirage sect were mostly humans. They were different from the beasts that liked to eat raw food. When had they ever seen such a bloody scene? Soon, the sound of bones being chewed stopped. A skinny figure jumped out from the ground. It was a humanoid creature that looked more like an ape. Its body was only covered with skin and bones. There was nothing in its 2 empty eye sockets. Its withered hair was stuck to its head. The corner of its mouth was full of blood and minced meat. It looked quite terrifying. Huan Ji said with a pale face, "Demonic corpse. It has been thousands of years. How can there still be demonic corpses here?" The ape corpse emitted a thick corpse aura. It let out a roar and pounced towards Huan Ji. In another place, a 5th-level core formation demonic bear of the bear tribe covered his bloody broken arm. He looked at the black shadow that was biting his arm in the fog. He felt a chill in his heart. Although it was also a demonic creature, it had never been so cruel. It was different from those wild demonic bears. Its parents were demonic beasts. It was born with intelligence. It ate cooked meat and drank fruit juice. The thick smell of blood made him feel nauseous. At this time, the black shadow had finished biting his arm and pounced towards him from the fog. 100 steps behind him, several people from the demonic Dao and demon sect were attacking a demonic corpse that came out from the ground. In other places, the elders of the 6 Dao sects were also in a similar situation. A female elder of the Pill Cauldron sect looked at the wolf corpse that was pouncing towards her. She waved her hand and threw a pill into the wolf corpse's mouth. Sizzle, green smoke came out of the wolf corpse's mouth. Soon, its entire body turned into a pile of powder. In another place, a bear corpse was pouncing towards the elder of the South sect. It was punched in the head, and the bear corpse's head exploded. At almost the same time, A leopard corpse was killed by the sword array of the spirit array sect. At the place where Xuanzong was, lightning suddenly struck down from the fog and killed the two black shadows. On the northern sect side, a demonic corpse stretched out its sharp claws and stabbed at a northern sect elder. With a few crisp sounds, its claws broke. At the same time, its head was easily cut off by the northern sect elder's sword. Somewhere in the cave dwelling, Li Mu watched as the two monster corpses turned to ashes beneath the Fulu, a thoughtful expression on his face. Why would there be a strange demon corpse here? Although zombies lived longer than most races, it was impossible for them to live for more than 3,000 years. From the moment a corpse gained sentience, it had to re-enter the cycle of life and death. Furthermore, these demonic corpses looked extremely strange. Their strength was obviously not weak, and they were not weaker than a fourth realm flying stiff. However, they did not possess the simple intelligence of flying stiff. Under normal circumstances, this was impossible, unless they were strong cultivators above the fifth realm before they died. The strength of a strong cultivator's corpse would naturally be extraordinary. They had existed in the form of corpses in this cave, dwelling for as long as 3,000 years. Perhaps the entrance of Li Mu and the others had stimulated them, causing them to mutate. This was the only reason that could explain why there were demon corpses that had lived for 3,000 years. Although these corpses were very old, they had only mutated for a short period of time. If the corpses buried under these stone tablets were the corpses of strong cultivators from the demon clan from 3,000 years ago, and because of the influx of living people, the process of mutating had accelerated, then Li Mu looked at the other stone tablets. Indeed, he saw that all the surrounding stone tablets had begun to shake violently. He looked at the people around him and said in a low voice, "This place is strange. Everyone, be careful underground." Black shadows broke out from the ground under the stone steel. The thick corpse aura, mixed with the smell of decay, seemed to have diluted the surrounding fog a little. A Fulu school elder frowned and said, "Why are there so many demon corpses in the Demon Emperor's cave dwelling?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Don't worry about that. Let's get rid of them first. Otherwise, more and more of them will gather. If we can use the Fulu, try not to exhaust your own mana." Yes. Hearing this, the Fulu school disciples and the high priests of the imperial court all launched their Fulu attacks. The demon corpses in front of them had to be destroyed. Otherwise, they would be in a dilemma. Fortunately, these demon corpses only had strength but no intelligence. It was very easy to get rid of them. The group continued to move forward at a slow pace. In the process of moving forward, Li Mu also noticed that the fog around them was tumbling and sending waves of mana waves. Obviously, the others here were also fighting with the demon corpses. Li Mu carefully observed these demon corpses. A mystery gradually emerged in his heart. From the strength of these demon corpses, their masters should have been strong cultivators of the demon clan when they were alive. If these strong cultivators died in an accident, then their corpses would most likely not be left behind. Under normal circumstances, only when one's lifespan was exhausted would there be corpses left behind. But from the appearance of these demon corpses, they did not die because their lifespan was exhausted. These demon corpses had strong bodies. Most of them were still in the prime of their lives. Only when there were no more stone tablets around them and no more demon corpses jumping out did the group realize that they had arrived at a vast square. What they were stepping on was no longer earth, but crystal clear, spiritual jades. However, the spiritual jades laid on the ground did not have any spiritual chi. If the spiritual chi in the spiritual jades was absorbed by cultivators at an accelerated rate, the entire spiritual jade would turn into dust the moment the spiritual chi was exhausted. Only when the spiritual chi was allowed to slowly dissipate could it form a complete spiritual jade stone. It was not hard to imagine that the spiritual jades laid here 3,000 years ago should still contain spiritual chi. However, as time passed, the spiritual chi in the spiritual jades had all dissipated. Spiritual jades were items that gathered spiritual chi from the outside world. However, when there was no spiritual chi in the outside world, the spiritual chi in the spiritual jade could not be retained and would gradually dissipate outside. However, this dissipation speed was extremely slow. It would take hundreds to thousands of years for the spiritual chi in a spiritual jade to dissipate completely. These spiritual jades without spiritual chi also showed that this place had been through a long period of time. The fog in the square was much thinner than outside the square. The group could already see the situation 100 steps away. In a certain direction, the fog rolled and several figures walked out. Huan Ji's group of 10 people seemed to be in a sorry state. Their faces were all pale, and their bodies were covered with injuries. One of the handsome men had even lost a leg, and he looked rather miserable. Huan Ji did not expect Li Mu to arrive here before them. After her expression changed slightly, she maintained a certain distance from them and sat cross-legged on the ground. She took out 2 spiritual jades and held them in her hands as she meditated. Not long after, more figures walked out from the fog. After Xuanzong's group of 5 walked to the square, they smiled at Li Mu and the others. They also found a place and held spiritual jades in their hands to recover their spiritual chi. Shortly after, the elders of the South Sect, North Sect, Pill Cauldron Sect, and Spirit Array Sect also arrived at the square. Following closely behind them were the Ghost Sect and the Demon Sect. 5 people from the Demon Sect entered, but only 4 arrived. Among them, 1 had a broken arm and 1 had a broken leg. Although the Ghost Sect did not have fewer people, their bodies were much more illusory than when they entered. One of them was at the 5th realm when they entered, but when he arrived, his aura was only at the 4th realm. The last to arrive were the subordinates of the 4 demon kings. Of the 5 subordinates of the Snake King, only 4 were left. Chapter 404. Only now did everyone realize that they were in a square in front of a palace. Huan Ji looked at the palace and muttered, "Demon Emperor Palace." Above Li Mu's head, the paper crane flapped its wings and slowly flew towards the palace, finally landing on the stone steps in front of the palace. All the Tao pages in this world came from the Tao scripture. The Fu Lu that Xian Jizi gave him contained the aura of the Tao pages and could sense the location of the other Tao pages. Obviously, the Tao page that Demon Emperor by D once had was in this palace. The compass in the hands of an elder of the northern sect trembled a few times and pointed towards the palace. The people of the demon sect, as well as the subordinates of the various demon kings, looked at the palace shrouded in mist, a strange light flashing in their eyes. Everyone knew very well that their target this time was inside the palace, but no one acted rashly. In the short time that they had walked to the square, they had already suffered heavy losses. Who knew if there were any other dangers in this Demon Emperor Palace? No one was willing to take the first step. The first to move was the Spirit Array Sect. Although the elders of the 6 Taoist sects had expended a lot of energy in the battle with the monster corpses, their overall strength had been preserved. This was also the foundation of the 6 Taoist sects that was different from the Demon Kings and the Demon Sects. In fact, anyone in the 6 sects could easily destroy a branch of the Demon Sects. But compared to the entire Demon Sects, it was far inferior. Although the 6 sects combined could suppress the Demon Sects, they could not bear the losses of destroying them. The role of a 7th realm expert was no different from a nuclear bomb. The Demon Sects, the Taoist sects, the Imperial Court, and the Buddhist sects were all nuclear powers. No matter how deep the hatred between them was, they would not easily interfere in the war of the upper realms. If they could not control or destroy all the 7th realm experts in one go, they would have to be prepared to be destroyed together. Following the actions of the Spirit Array sect, after some consideration, the other forces followed behind them and slowly approached the palace. Although no one was willing to take the lead, if they stood here, the treasures would not fly out of the Demon Emperor Palace. When the time came, the Spirit Array sect would eat the meat, and they would not even be able to drink the soup. The fact that the Spirit Array sect didn't have any scruples meant that there was no array formation here. They didn't want to be trapped in an array formation after escaping from the monster corpse. Li Mu led the Imperial Court Guardians and Fulu school students, but they did not walk at the front. He felt that something was not quite right. Whether it was the mist in the Demon Emperor's cave abode, the neat rows of stone steels around the Demon Emperor's palace, or the unnatural deaths of the ancient demon clan experts under the stone steels, everything was strange. As the group approached the demonic Emperor Palace, the thin layer of fog in the plaza gradually did not affect their vision. The full view of the Demon Imperial Palace appeared before everyone's eyes. This was a magnificent palace. In terms of size, it couldn't compare to the Great Zhou Imperial Palace, but this palace alone was more luxurious than any other palace in the Imperial Palace. Outside the palace, there were several white jade pillars carved with many reliefs. The reliefs depicted scenes of hundreds of Fae worshipping the Fae Imperial Palace. 3,000 years ago, the Demon Emperor Bai Di was a true demon sovereign. He had countless Fae soldiers under his command, and he had 10 great Fae kings, each of whom was a powerhouse in the upper realm. That was the time when the Demon Clan was the most powerful in the last 10,000 years. They were so powerful that even the human clan had to avoid them. In front of the Demon Emperor Palace, there was a huge statue. The statue was about 3 feet tall, and it was a mighty middle-aged man. He stood in front of the Demon Emperor Palace, overlooking the entire plaza. His body was full of an aura of disdain for the world. It was just a statue, but it made people want to submit to him from the bottom of their hearts. The elders of the 6 sects and the people of the Demon Path were better off. The subordinates of the 4 great Fae kings were all pale. They lowered their heads, and a look of submission appeared on their faces. In front of the former Demon Emperor, they couldn't bring up any thoughts of resistance. Li Mu looked at the statue of the Demon Emperor and only sighed in his heart. No matter how powerful his master was, he couldn't resist the invasion of time. 3,000 years had passed, and no matter how powerful his existence was, it was inevitable for him to return to dust. Li Mu always subconsciously felt that 3,000 years was very short, but thinking about it carefully, the Chinese civilization was only 5,000 years old. 3,000 years ago, the land of China was still the Western Zhou dynasty. At that time, King Wu had just conquered the Zhou dynasty. Suddenly, Li Mu felt that the Demon Emperor Palace in front of him was filled with an ancient aura. The Demon Emperor Palace's gate was wide open. Everyone finally stopped in front of the gate and didn't rush to go in. If the gate of the Demon Emperor Palace was closed, they might break in without hesitation. But as everyone knew, before the Demon Emperor's lifespan ended, he opened up his own cave and treated it as a tomb. Who would open their own tomb and welcome others in, until they noticed that there was a stone tablet in front of the Demon Emperor Palace. Chapter 405. Huan Ji held the jade bottle in her hand. 9 people from the Charm sect and the Mirage sect guarded her. On Li Mu's side, 4 Imperial consecrators and 5 Fulu school disciples had already surrounded the 2 sides. After the 5 sect elders looked at each other, they quickly made a decision and looked to Huan Ji. Huan Ji's side felt the pressure increase. Including Huan Ji herself, they only had 10 people here. On the other side, there were 35 people, including the consecrators from the Great Zhou. The difference in strength between the 2 sides was too great. They couldn't even fight. Li Mu looked to Huan Ji and comforted her. Look, we have more people than you. If we really fight, some of you will die. At that time, you won't be able to keep the item in your hand. Why don't you give it to me now? We won't have to fight. Wouldn't you be wasting your lives? The 9 people from the Charm sect and the Mirage sect hesitated. Although Li Mu's words were shameless, they were the truth. If they gave it to him, the jade bottle would fall into his hands. If they didn't give it to him, after these people killed them, the jade bottle would still fall into his hands. Since the outcome was already decided, why not just give it to him? Huan Ji's face darkened. She threw the jade bottle to Li Mu and gritted her teeth. She said hatefully, "You're not human." Li Mu kept the jade bottle and looked at her. He shook his head and said, "Between the two of us, I don't know who's not human. Don't you know?" Huan Ji was furious. She didn't want to talk to Li Mu. She gritted her teeth and said, "Call those brainless people up." The two went down the first level. Soon, the demon sect and demon king's subordinates flew up. When they saw the realm breaker pill, they were like cats that smell blood. They forgot their real purpose in entering the demon emperor's cave. That one page of the heavenly book was much more important than the realm breaker pill. At this moment, they were in a worse state than when they were attacked by the demon corpse. One of the 3 demon wolves had lost its body. Only its demon soul was left. One of the 3 demon leopards had lost its body. Unlike humans who cultivated their primordial spirit, demon strength would be greatly reduced if they lost their physical bodies. They were basically crippled. Of the 4 snake demons, 2 of them were beaten back to their original forms. Their tails couldn't transform into legs. Of the 5 bear demons, 2 of them could only exist as giant bears. As for the 4 demons of the demon sect, one of them had turned into a white tiger. The other 3 were covered in wounds, and their auras were weak. All the demons told themselves in their hearts that the heavenly tomes were more important than the realm breaker pill. However, after the attacks of the demonic corpses, their strength was greatly reduced. If they were to fight to the death, they might not be a match for Li Mu. However, at this point, they had no other choice. The fact that these demons would form an alliance was not out of Li Mu's expectations. After all, the Demon Emperor was the emperor of the demon race. What was recorded on the Tao page was also the cultivation path of the demon race. To them, the imperial court and the Taoist sects were robbers who came to snatch what belonged to the demon race. However, this time, Li Mu did not want to be a robber. He had no choice. After all, if the Tao page was obtained by the demon race or fell into the hands of the demon sect, they would be able to cultivate more powerful cultivators for them. In the near future, they would become a major threat to the Great Zhou. In that case, Li Mu's dream of conquering the demon nation and destroying the demon sect will be delayed indefinitely. The demon race and the demon sect did not want them to obtain the heavenly tomes. They also did not want the demon race and the demon sect to obtain the Tao page. On the 3rd floor of the Demon Imperial Palace, the atmosphere was extremely tense. A great battle was about to break out. After a long period of silence, a figure shot out from the demon sect's position and headed in the direction of the heavenly tomes. At the south sect's position, an elder's body turned into an afterimage as he tried to stop the demon. In the next moment, everyone moved. The entire 3rd floor of the Demon Imperial Palace erupted with dozens of waves of dermic power at the same time. After dealing with the countless demon corpses, the Fulu, elixirs, formation flags, and one-time used dermic treasures in everyone's hands were all used up. Even the Zero Jade was not much left. Among the 6 Taoist sects, the Fulu school, the Elixir Cauldron sect, and the Spirit Array sect needed to rely on external items. Their strength was greatly reduced, and they could only deal with the slightly weaker subordinates of the Demon King. Elder Xuanzong used his own dermic powers to cast dermic powers. The South sect used their dermic powers for close combat. The North sect relied on the defense of their treasured robes and dermic treasures to suppress the 4 demonic sects. Holding 2 short swords in her hands, Huan Ji gritted her teeth and flew towards Li Mu alone. When he was still in the 4th realm, Li Mu was already able to suppress Huan Ji. Now, his cultivation was not much weaker than Huan Ji's. However, in a space without spiritual qi and without the power of heaven and earth, he could not use his Tao techniques, and his strength was also reduced. Even so, he could deal with Huan Ji with ease. The consecrators and the elders of the six sects were also suppressing their opponents. They were originally senior elders, carefully selected by the various sects, and their strength was at the peak of the fifth realm. The consecrators of the imperial court were also the elites of the elites that Li Mu picked out from the consecrators department. On the other hand, although the demons and demonic sects were also in the fifth realm, most of them were not at the peak. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before his side won. What worried Li Mu was that everyone's Fu-Lu and elixirs had long been used up. There were not many spiritual jades left. Right now, the battle was using up the spiritual energy in their bodies. If their spiritual energy was used up, they would not be much stronger than normal people and would not be able to deal with any other changes. For the demons, even if their spiritual energy was used up, they still had their bodies. Their super recovery ability and endurance were one of the advantages of monsters in the first place. The subordinates of the Demon King were already heavily injured, and their wounds were still bleeding. However, they were still able to fight back and forth with the elders. Although these demons were not very intelligent, when they fought with their lives on the line, it was still a headache. Huan Ji was also fighting with her life on the line. She held two short swords and attacked Li Mu without any regard for her life. Her face was filled with hatred. Those who did not know would think that Li Mu had abandoned her. Although Li Mu could easily deal with Huan Ji, he could not withstand her desperate attacks, and his spiritual energy was quickly depleting. This cannot go on. Li Mu was thinking of a solution. He looked around, and when he saw a battle, his eyes narrowed. It was this moment of absent-mindedness that allowed Huan Ji to find his weakness. She stabbed her sword towards Li Mu's chest. However, she hesitated for a moment before stabbing towards his shoulder. Li Mu came back to his senses and stretched out his right hand. He grabbed her wrist that was holding the sword and frowned. Something is wrong. Huan Ji flung his hand away and stabbed her sword again. She said angrily, "You can get distracted during a battle. Damn it, you actually looked down on me." Li Mu grabbed her wrist again and used his other hand to hit her head. He said in a low voice, "Stupid fox, haven't you noticed that something is wrong?" Huan Ji's other hand held her sword and slashed towards Li Mu's neck. She was extremely angry. "You dare to call me a stupid fox? I will kill you." Li Mu grabbed her other wrist and said in a low voice, "Look." Huan Ji's face was filled with anger. She struggled a few times and inadvertently looked into Li Mu's eyes. She saw the seriousness in his eyes and was shocked. She asked, "What are you looking at?" Li Mu looked at the white jade ground and muttered, "Where is the blood?" Huan Ji followed his gaze and saw a bear demon fighting with a Fu-Lu school elder.